Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru right here on another winter's day in 2023. I'm your host, the great Brian Last. We have questions and a review later on, and we're going to talk about some other stuff too, but let's get things going right away by talking about the news that has broken over the last day, the passing of Jerry Jarrett with this man, the leader of the cult of Cornette, the star of the Drive-Thru, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Well, you and I have been engaging in a little silliness right before we went on the air, trying to get motivated to do this in the proper way. And it didn't hurt that you blew the first take of your intro 3 words in and had to do it again. That gave me a chuckle. But again, we are sitting here, having to, for unfortunate reasons, talk about somebody that we've talked about many times in the past and their contributions to the business and etc., but focusing on somebody else that we've just lost. And I mean, it wasn't one of those things like the Jay Briscoe, the suddenness and I was not aware that Jerry was even sick, and he just did the Tales from the Territories shoot last I guess they shot that last summer, which aired in the fall, and spoke to Evan Husney at Dark Side, and he said that he was, great and seemed like, and he looked like Jerry has for the last however many years. But he was 80 years old, and, I don't know exactly what the cause was. It's been not even 24 hours since we heard this, and there's people that I could have called, but to be honest, I'm tired of calling people asking about what was wrong with people when they passed away. So I just haven't done that yet. Point is, it happened. And as I was going to say, it wasn't like, the situation with Jay where it just came out of nowhere and a guy, with his kids in the car down the road from the house. But, we are starting to again realize how many of the great personalities in whatever field, in wrestling or managing or promoting or booking or whatever, that that aren't with us anymore. And this is why Jerry was the youngest owner of a territory at one time, which is why he's pretty much one of the last ones to go. Can you think, excepting Vince McMahon, who's still around as we know, was he the next most important, most successful wrestling promoter still alive? Some people might say Bill Watts, but he was truthfully not a promoter as long, nor he had a hotter period, but for longevity, he wasn't as successful as Jerry, and in multiple locations. Anyway, your thoughts?
I'd hate to argue over who was more important. That's a bigger discussion.
Right.
But in terms of success, especially considering the period of time, and success as both a promoter and a booker, because you have to separate them, because he started as a booker before he was the promoter. So I think you do have to separate that. The other ones who are still alive, Ron Fuller, obviously Southeastern, Vince McMahon, like you mentioned. There aren't too many. I mean, it's one of these moments where you stop and you think, yeah, the territories have been gone a long time.
And Jerry, and this is why I always recognize Jeff Jarrett, and because it ran in the Jarrett family, and as we'll probably talk about, from where Jerry learned booking and promoting, it ran in the Welch family. They wanted to run towns, to start territories, to open territories, to open towns, to book talent, rather than just concentrating on just being wrestlers and or just in their home market. And that's why I said, Jeff, who else? People, Global Force didn't go. Well, who else started a Global Force? And before that, it was Jeff and Jerry that started TNA. Who else started TNA? That thing's still around. It ran in the family that they had an aptitude for the wrestling business, the business of the business. And Jerry started, he always, as you said, he was a booker before he ever even wrestled, which is almost unheard of in the territory days, especially. But
Especially considering his age.
Well, yes, because let's go back with. I've talked so many times about Christine Jarrett, Teeny. When Jerry was 3 years old, I think 2 or 3 years old, that's when she got to part-time jobs selling tickets for the Goulas Welch booking office in Nashville out of a ticket window at a shoe store in downtown Nashville. She needed extra money because Jerry's father, after Jerry was born, and I think I can't remember, Carolyn was a couple years younger, but Jerry's father had been in service in World War II. It was actually wartime. And shortly after he came home is when they were divorced and she needed extra money. So she gets the job selling tickets, for the wrestling matches at the shoe store, and ends up not only selling tickets at the matches, going to work in Goulas and Welch's office, and then running the office. And she was basically the office manager. They had Nina Bond forever, but Teeny ran the office. And then not only selling tickets at towns, but then, she had Jerry selling the 5-cent Slamagram program at the matches in Nashville when he was 7 years old, in the late 40s. And you've got a couple of them from that time period. They're 4-page newsprint foldovers and went for 5 cents a piece. And that was his first job in the wrestling business. And then when he was a teenager, he made extra money by promoting spot shows and, putting up posters and going around town trying to sell ads in a program. And when he got out of school, he took it to a little more, a bigger level as far as going out and the grassroots promotion of wrestling. It used to be just like when the county fair came to town or the carnival or fucking whatever. So meanwhile, I don't think people understand when we say the Goulas Welch wrestling office and people think, oh, the 60s and 70s in Tennessee. Roy Welch had been booking wrestlers out of Nashville since, what was it, either the late 30s or very early 40s. And he brought Nick Goulas up from Birmingham to use as his front man because he was still a wrestler, as were his brothers, Herb and Jack and Lester. And, so especially in those days, the promoter couldn't also be known as, or the booker couldn't be known. People didn't know what a booker was. You couldn't be the promoter and a wrestler at the same time. That would look funny. So Nick was the public face until Roy, retired. But again, Roy had seen early on that the way to make money in wrestling was to have a group of guys, a group of talent that was loyal to you, and to book them out to different promoters and to have a booking office. That was the difference in the days before television. That was the difference between a promoter who ran his town like Cleveland, and a booking office where there was a centralized group of guys and a promoter that booked that talent out to, other places. And so that's what Roy Welch had only been wrestling in the late 30s, about 10 years. But we see from some of Scott Teal's wonderful research, especially the book on the history of wrestling in Amarillo, Texas, that Roy Welch was wrestling there in 1930 and again in 1932. In 32, he brought Pat Malone, the Green Shadow. He had him with him too, that they would later on go to work together for 40 fucking years. And he was learning this shit from Cal Farley and Dutch Mantell, the original Dutch Mantell, who now I found out turned pro in 1896. So that means that Jerry Jarrett learned booking and promoting wrestling from a guy who learned from a guy who was a pro in 1896. So the point is, that's what the Roy Welch set up that booking office. And even before television, Gulas and Welch booked tons of guys into different fucking places all around the Southeast. And when they gradually built that territory, especially when TV came along and it became easier to promote these guys in that region, it was one of the biggest geographic territories in the country, and they had more wrestlers and more towns running than almost any other territory. And the only two of the modern territories that were still under the same ownership in the television era, completely through from beforehand, were Jim Crockett Promotions in the Carolinas because of Crockett Sr. starting in the 30s, and Gulas and Welch in Tennessee, in Nashville. Every other territory, the modern territories, as they formed, they had changed hands from the pre-television era. And a guy who became a big star on national television in the early 50s, like Vern Gagne, would go home and buy into his own territory. Tennessee and the surrounding area and the Carolinas weathered that all through those years. So anyway, Jerry, as a result of being around the office and Teeny having worked for Roy at that point for 20 years, Jerry, becomes a referee and starts riding to Memphis with Roy Welch. And again, Memphis had been an acquisition. Remember, Gulas and Welch started with Nashville, and then they annexed Chattanooga. And in the early 50s, they got Birmingham from, who was the old promoter down there? Chris Jordan. Because Nick always wanted Birmingham because that was his hometown. Now he's the big deal in Birmingham wrestling. And Birmingham and Memphis both ran on Monday nights. So Nick would always go to Birmingham. And then in, 57, 58, when they finally got control of Memphis, Roy, because his family by then had settled up in Dyersburg in West Tennessee, Roy would go to Memphis every Monday. And he wouldn't let Nick fuck with Memphis. It was the Golden City, right? Roy would install his own bookers. His son, Buddy Fuller, when they got Memphis, he put Buddy in charge of booking. Or he'd send Buddy to open up a territory in Alabama if some towns were dark, or Louisiana. Nick and Roy almost had Florida in the 40s. They sent Nick down and he ran Tampa for a while. And he was always trying to take over more territory. So now he's going to Memphis every Monday night in the mid-60s, and Roy was in charge of Memphis. And you could kind of tell the cards, the lineups in the newspaper were the same verbiage and some of the same talent and the same kind of things they'd been doing for years, right? Since Roy had taken over. But the story was, and, he started asking Jerry, well, what do you think? And I mean, the first time Jerry said that Roy Welch asked him what he thought, Jerry came in the office because they hadn't smartened him up yet when he was a teenager or whatever. And he said, I hate to tell you, but on the town the other night, I think two of the guys had a fake match. And Roy said, do tell. Why do you think that? Well, it just seemed to me they weren't trying very hard. So then, anyway, Roy likes him, and they smartened him up, and on the way to Memphis and back, Roy would say, well, what would you do? And Jerry would give him ideas for the Memphis cards. So finally, 1967, Roy announces to the boys that the new booker is Jerry Jarrett. The kid's been running those spot shows, and a bunch of guys just fucking, well, bullshit. And, what the fuck? And he said, you dumb son of a bitches. He's been booking for the last 3 months. I just didn't tell you. And so at any rate.
Did Jerry ever forget which guys gave him a hard time?
I don't think so.
Saul Weingroff, right? Isn't that the story?
Well, Saul didn't do it right then, but Saul later on. And that story that Jerry told me, because I asked him, I think it was disputed by George Weingroff from what I heard. But nevertheless, the story goes that when Jerry opened up the northern end up here, which we'll get to in a second, that Saul wanted to be booked in Bowling Green, which was an hour from Nashville, instead of Lexington on Thursday nights, Kentucky, which was 4 hours back then. And because Bowling Green was outdrawing Lexington. And Jerry heard about it, said, all right. And so then later on, when Lexington was outdrawing Bowling Green, Saul goes up to him, well, why ain't I booked in Lexington? He said, I heard you don't want to be booked in Lexington, and I intend to honor your request for the rest of our lives. And then Saul was up. But I think there was some heat with Nick, too, at that point. But anyway, that's what happened is Jerry starts booking Memphis. And he's 25 years old. And I don't know if he had actually even refereed at that point. But I think they may have said, well, he's got to get in the ring and have some perspective on that. So he started refereeing. And then the story, well, one night, same as happens with a lot of guys, somebody didn't show up on a spot show and they were short a guy and they said, well, you need to work. What? And they put a hood on him. And then later on, I think he realized, well, I can probably get over because he was young when all the baby faces in the Tennessee territory were older. Eddie Marlin, who Jerry helped tremendously and booked and, became his father-in-law. But Jackie Fargo, who Jerry kind of gave a renaissance to because Fargo he'd been in Memphis so long at one point, he just kind of was expected to be there. And he was up and down the card in the mid-late 60s. And he had a, lounge in Memphis and a sign painting business he got Lawler involved with. But Jerry remembered the fabulous Fargos and how much, they got over with him, seeing them walk in the building, when he was a teenager. He was a teenage boy. So the fabulous Fargos were over with him. They're like the road warriors of their day. So he repushed and repackaged Jackie Fargo into the fucking legend and ended up, not only did Jackie have a renaissance there when in the especially in the late 69, early 70, when Jerry really had firm control of the book, but also Jackie was on top with Al Green in the first sellout of the Mid-South Coliseum when they moved there in 1972. And Jackie Fargo had not drawn 11,000 people in Memphis in a long fucking time. So it had to be part of the booking and the usage, right? But at that point, he didn't have the book for a year, and he was starting to look for other towns, which I have to think that was advice from Roy Welch. That was the MO. And everybody said, okay, the band across what is now Interstate 64, well, I guess it was then, it was built by then, Evansville, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, and probably at that point over into maybe Beckley, those towns were dark. That meant they weren't being run for live events. They didn't have a local television. Bruiser had forsaken Louisville and Evansville, and it was open. So Jerry kept coming up here trying to get TV. And I think he actually got Lexington, maybe even Evansville first, but eventually he got Louisville, as we've talked about in our retrospectives, to open up Louisville in June of 1970. He was on TV for, I think we figured out 10 or 12 weeks, one or the other, and then opened up weekly live events and ran the same building in the same town every week for the next 27 fucking years. And we've talked about the houses in Louisville, and, Evansville was a town. I mean, bless them out there. Love the Rock-A-Bar. But that's when, by that point, Teenie was not only instrumental to the Goulis Welch office, and she was the prime ticket seller on Saturday nights or on any nights they ran the fairgrounds in Nashville, and all the fans loved her there. Jerry gave her half of his business in Louisville Wrestling Enterprises and these towns up here. So I know that she was And she did fulfill the function of promoter of these towns, as when we've talked about that aspect, and you can find it on the YouTube channel. She was the promoter, dealing with the TV, dealing with the newspaper, dealing with the building, checking up the box office. So she predates Ann Gunkel as a wrestling promoter, and bless her little pea-picking heart, I guarantee Ann Gunkel didn't work as hard or do as many things as Christine Jarrett did. And as far as female promoters in wrestling, you can point to Eileen Eaton, but she inherited the business from her husband and really passed it to be run by her son, and spent more time, I understand, with the boxing end than wrestling at the Olympic. So at that point, Christine was the, if not the only, certainly the most successful, and this was before Leah Maivia, the only female promoter in the business, in the United States at least, right?
Yeah, you went over the other list, and obviously there have been recent things on TV. Leah Maivia did promote, but it was much later. She wasn't the first.
So, and Christine was basically promoting with Louisville and Evansville and the spot shows that she either ran Lexington, Kentucky during those years once a month, and a spot show the other 3 weeks on a Thursday, or oftentimes Saturday. I would say between 1970 and when she finally got off the road in, what was it, maybe 94, 95, she had run as many as 175 live events a year. She was responsible for 52 in Louisville, 52 in Evansville, at least 12 in Lexington, and 3 other Thursdays a month. That's 36, plus some Saturdays. I remember spending many a Saturday night in Madisonville, Kentucky. So now, you know, he had set her up as partners in the promotion. So once again, because he was still wrestling, the promoter couldn't also be a wrestler in the people's eyes. He did the same thing that Roy had done with Nick, but in this case, it's his mother, who every one of the fans loved because she took time to talk to every single one of them. And she was a celebrity in the building too. There goes Mrs. Jarrett. That's Jerry Jarrett's mother. And so now he's become the booker. He's started refereeing. He's looking to open up these towns. And then he becomes, before he's even 30, the top, actually one of the 3 most popular baby faces in the territory, and the town you were in, depending on whether he was number 1, number 2, or number 3. He starts wrestling, and let's face it, everybody's seen Jerry. He was a good athlete in school for what that was worth, but he had no physique whatsoever. But he was young, and he had the blonde hair, and he could sell. And he understood psychology. And even if Jeff is a better worker than Jerry ever was, from a standpoint of how the shit looked in the ring and how athletic he was, and et cetera, and his physique, the whole 9 yards. But at the same time, Jeff never had the chance, and most people never will again, to draw the money that Jerry Jarrett did in the ring for about a 4 or 5 year period, where he was working on top, and he never made himself the singles champion. And he put himself in with Lawler when he was a top single heel, because he could get heat on Lawler the way he could sell and the sympathy people had for him. He never put the belt on himself. He put tag belts on himself because that was the way that he originally made a splash in the business. He started wrestling underneath, right? And you would see his name, Jerry Jarrett, in the second match or whatever. And then on television, they would start telling a story. Well, he seems to be getting a little better. And then I think finally maybe on TV he won one time. And he would do an interview every now and then where he credited his mentor, his trainer, that was really helping him out and bringing him along, but nobody knew who it was. And finally they pulled the trigger on the angle and I can't even, it was before my time, and it was Memphis TV. But the heels, whoever they fucking were, probably the interns of Ken Ramey, as I think about it now, they get on fucking Jerry Jarrett, and here comes one of the biggest heels in the territory for the past 10 years, Tojo Yamamoto, and makes the comeback. And the people are, and they reveal that he's the one, which was a shoot. He's the one that's been training Jerry Jarrett to be a wrestler. And instantly and now Tojo and Jerry Jarrett are the biggest babyface tag team, and against the interns, against the Von Brauners, against Don and Al Green. That Tojo and Jerry is what popped Louisville. And Jerry Jarrett became, and he didn't need sometimes to bring Fargo up here I don't think Fargo appeared up here for the first year because he was down in Nick's more established towns. But Jerry Jarrett became the top babyface in Louisville, Jerry and Tojo. And Fargo was the guy in Memphis, but Jerry and Tojo were the tag team. And, so now he's one of the top fucking babyfaces, and they're selling pictures of him hand over fist because he's, like I said, he's one of the only. Tojo was not a good looking man for the ladies, right? Even though he was over as fuck. And Fargo had his clientele, and most of them had beehives from the 50s. So here's blonde-haired 28-year-old Jerry Jarrett, and the girls are swooning. So he's a promoter of some of the towns. He's a booker of the main town in the territory and his own towns. And he's one of the top baby faces. And his mother is handling his towns for him. And another one of the people that Roy Welch, when he got in the ring, had work out with him, as you heard the story on Tales from the Territories, was Sailor Moran. And if you go back and look at that Amarillo book I was talking about before, Sailor Moran is one of the old-time fucking shooters that was working in West Texas in the 30s with Roy Welch. So he knew this fucking guy because he knew that all these guys that were going to be jealous that had been, and even in the other end of the territory, Nick's booker, Lynn Rossi, was never a fan of the Jarrett philosophy, right? They were liable to try to take it out on, which Mario Galento later on would, for real, on Live Memphis TV. So that's why he said, if you're going to be in the ring, you got to, Tojo will teach you how to work, and Sailor Moran will teach you how to take care of yourself.
And again, the Mario Galento story, the story has changed over time based on who was telling it and when, but one of the interesting facets of it that has kind of been a universal part of the story for at least a little while is the idea that Roy Welch would have put Mario Galento up to this, considering what you just said about Sailor Moran.
Well, and see, here's the thing. And a lot of people, and I saw somebody wrote a piece on the internet and mentioned, well, Jerry Jarrett beat Goulas and Welch in the promotional war. Actually, no, Roy Welch was dead. The Galento incident happened in 1973, I believe, maybe late 72, early 73. Roy Welch died a couple years later. Jerry split from Nick, Goulas Welch Wrestling Enterprises, a couple years after that. We'll get into it. But toward the end of his life, Roy, they said, was potentially had Alzheimer's or whatever. And people had convinced him that Jerry was trying to steal the territory, which, going back to guys who were in the business in the fucking teens and 20s and 30s, that's what would happen. And he may have believed it and maybe wanted to fucking do something. Who knows what the fuck? But yeah, the Roy was Jerry's benefactor all through the years of that. And then finally, right before he died, it was suspected maybe he was the one put Mario Galento up to hit in the ring on him. But Jerry didn't steal the territory for another 4 years. But he actually didn't steal it. If Nick had been smart and realized what was going on and what he had and just made him partner, it would have changed the course of the wrestling business and history, but he didn't. He's tried to screw him, and Jerry said, well, fuck you. Because Nick had never been the one that the boys were mostly loyal to. It had been Roy Welch, even though he was the heel behind the scenes, good cop, bad cop. He was the good cop in front of the fucking boys and the bad cop behind it. But most of the talent was loyal to Jerry Jarrett because he had made them money. His towns drew better. He paid better. The TV was better. Everything was better in the Jarrett end. Even when Bobby Shane went to Australia and told Barnes and Dundee, "Oh, you got to go to Tennessee. You guys will get over there." He said, "But don't go to work for Nick. You're going to work for the little man." And, that was the thing. People came even before Jerry opened his own company. People came to work for Jerry because, he was getting a reputation that he could get people over.
Well, plus he had the relationships. Who had a relationship with Jim Barnett? Jerry Jarrett, not Nick Goulas.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, so think about this now. I've just given you from 67 to 72. He becomes a booker. He becomes a referee. He becomes the wrestler. He opens his own fucking towns. He's running his own promotion as a satellite of the Goulas Welch office while being a top babyface and booking the biggest town in the territory. And then Barnett comes back from Australia, enticed by the NWA collective to try to win the Atlanta Wrestling War against Ann Gunkel. And was Watts the booker when Barnett came back, or did he bring Watts in first?
No, Watts was the booker.
Watts was already the booker.
Yeah, everything happened Thanksgiving time 72. By early 73, Watts was already the booker, put in there by Eddie Graham.
Right. So when they get
for
Barnett
a piece of the
to come
office,
back for 5%, right?
10%, I think.
Was it okay? It was 10 because that's what Ole ended up with.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as Watts is going to be, moved out and back over to Louisiana, Oklahoma, Barnett asked for Jerry Jarrett to come and book Atlanta. Because now what's happening in that year, 1973, not only all those other things I talked about happening, but Jerry as booker in Memphis has got Jerry Lawler and Jim White as his top heel tag team, working a program with, it was Jackie and Roughhouse Fargo, where they had either 2 or 3 sellouts of the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum 2 or 3 weeks in a row. And it was a record crowd. They'd 11,000 something people one week, and then they beat it by 40 people the next week or whatever the fuck. So Barnett there's this kid in fucking Memphis that's booking sellouts in this building, and he's using, and Lawler at the time was 23 years old, 22, no, 23. What the fuck's going on? So he brings Jarrett to be his booker in Atlanta. And so Jerry's still relying on Teeny a lot to run his towns. He's booking Memphis, but now he's also booking Atlanta, which was basically in those days. He booked the television on TBS, TCG at that time, and the Atlanta Omni cards or the City Auditorium cards, whichever week it was. And, Fred Ward in Columbus and Macon, they did a lot of their own booking, but he's down there for the Omni. He's down there for the Atlanta cards. He's taking some Tennessee talent down, and they're doing business down there. I believe Jerry said he booked the first wrestling sellout in the Omni, which was either maybe Thanksgiving 74, early 75, one of those hot programs with Wrestling 2, who he kind of fostered that gimmick along.
It would have been 74 that he was talking about.
So, and at the same time in 74, as we've talked about, Memphis, the Coliseum for 50 shows sold 400,000 wrestling tickets. So the guy that was booking that in Memphis, and Louisville wasn't doing bad either. The crowds were big in Louisville in 73 and 74. He's also booking the Omni in Atlanta. He's also, when he can find time to work, one of the top baby faces still in the territory here. And it was pretty much, Jerry still worked on a limited basis in 76 and 77. I mean, wrestled in the ring. And he would come back every so often. He did some things in 79 when business was down here or whatever. But by that point, he quit wrestling. He didn't have time for it. And, again, we're just to the mid 70s at this point. He had, like I said, relations with, he had a relationship. I don't want to say that way. He had a relationship with Jim Barnett that lasted the rest of their lives. At Barnett, and he would stay in contact. And through that, he also got a relationship with Eddie Graham when Jerry finally, and we've covered the whole split with Nick in detail, and it's on the YouTube channel somewhere. But when he finally split with Nick, the NWA fully supported Jerry Jarrett rather than Nick Goulas, who had been, because Roy Welch had not been in the inaugural NWA class in 1948, but he joined in 49. And that had been a source of pride for Nick, even though he was not real popular with the rest of the NWA promoters, that he was the NWA guy all those years. It was, the logo was all over the TV and the interview desk, and he'd mention it all the time, and then the newspaper ads. And as soon as Jerry announced he was forming his own company, Nick couldn't get any help from anybody but the Sheik. Barnett backed up, Eddie Graham backed up, everybody, because they knew what was going to happen. And within 6 weeks, Nick's out of Memphis, and Jerry's drawing 7,000-8,000 people a week to Cook Convention Center.
And within 4 years, the Sheik's out of the NWA.
Well, yeah, and pretty much out of business.
Yeah, within 3 years, yeah.
And then, so when Nick pulled out, the Coliseum immediately called Jerry and said, okay, you can have all the wrestling dates now, because the contract had been in Goulas Welch's name. So his first Coliseum show, April 24th, 1977, the main event, the NWA World Title, Harley Race and Rocky Johnson. Southern title, Jerry Lawler against Jack Briscoe. Dusty Rhodes was on the card. Guys in from Knoxville, because when Jerry was split off from Nick, since Roy was dead, Jerry took his son, Buddy Fuller, as a partner and formed the Jarrett Welch Wrestling Organization.
Got to keep the name Welch in there.
And the Fullers came over from Knoxville. They were going to start trading talent. Eddie Graham was in the back in the locker room because he came, and Dusty was on the card. It was like, okay, this is what we knew was going to happen, and we're going to endorse you because you're the future of the wrestling business in this territory. And then later, the only reason that Jerry ever left the NWA was because he couldn't get the belt for Lawler. And that was more important. So he went to the Vern, and the AWA schedule was a little lighter, and, there you go.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think getting the belt on your guy should be the sole reason you're in the NWA? Or at that time, should have been the sole reason you were in the NWA?
Jerry liked the NWA concept. He liked the world champion. And he loved Lou Thesz. As a kid, when he would see Lou Thesz come in the door of the arena with his expensive suitcase and wearing a suit, that looks like the world champion. He loved the idea of the world champion. He didn't necessarily have any loyalty to a specific endorsed world champion if it could benefit his business. He was not a proponent of rah-rah, everybody should stay in the NWA. At some point in those, because he was never going to be the biggest NWA territory, and a lot of people still look down on Tennessee because of Nick and Roy. So, and a lot of time have Nick, and also because none of them could ever get into it. So I think it was when it became a situation where we have done such incredible business with this guy, Jerry Lawler, for so long, but we can't let the people lose faith, and they're going to. It's been over 10 years now. He tried to create remember we talked about the CWA world title with superstar Billy Graham and Billy Robinson, and it didn't catch on. People didn't buy that as one of the big ones because they didn't see it anywhere else in the magazines, and it didn't have the history. But the AWA title, and Bockwinkel was such a fucking champion and such a great worker, that program got the AWA belt over in Memphis probably more than the NWA belt had been, because the NWA champion hadn't been there that often.
How much of that was due to Bockwinkel?
A lot of it.
If it had been any other AWA champion, I don't know if it would have worked as well.
No, well, Vern actually worked a match on the debut AWA event in 1978. Lawler and Bockwinkel were on top, and Vern was on the card against Eddie Sullivan, and Vern would not have gotten over. And he was a champion in 81, by the way, remember. He wouldn't have gotten over. Bockwinkel could do it, because he could work any style. But nevertheless, so that was the idea behind, they had to get Lawler a run of some description with the world title so those people wouldn't lose faith. And the NWA, they tried it several times, tried it again in 82 with the angle with Flair, and he couldn't get it done. But again, he still, that's the thing, is that's just in the 70s and early 80s when the Von Erichs were in trouble, when Fritz was in trouble in Dallas in the late 80s. Who'd he call? Jerry Jarrett. Can you come down, run my business? And the same thing happened in 82. First of all, remember Bruiser. Bruiser calls, hey, can you send up your talent, run my business? I got the TV slot still. He just had nobody left. Spike Huber and Steve Regal. It was it, right? And so Jarrett said yes. And then not only was the second time we went, the main event of the first tour on Thanksgiving weekend of a brand new fucking group of talent in an almost dead wrestling promotion, so that was a thrill, was Bruiser versus Kamala. Kamala had just started and Bruiser was about finished. And then by the second weekend, Bruiser was trying to get by, and he beat Kamala, by the way. And he was trying to get back on the cards regularly and trying to, get some of his old cronies. And Jarrett just said, never mind, just take it. Well, then in Dallas, they did go down, and Jerry curtailed a lot of the losses and had some things moving. And wasn't that the time he let Eric Embry book the thing for a while? And
well, he bought out Fritz, remember? And he was partners with Kevin and Kerry before they sold out finally.
Yes. But then he couldn't control the boys. And he ended up giving it, he said, here, you guys run this fucking thing. Every time he'd pull out, everything would go to shit again.
What about 83 when Watts' business is down and he brings in Jarrett and Lawler to look at his talent? I mean, it may be a little crude what was said, but that's a great example of the mind, bringing him in, look at my business. I can't figure out what's wrong. What do you see? And he got it right away.
Yeah. Where's the blowjobs? And he thought they wanted for themselves. No, you look at your crowd. Because look at your roster. All the baby faces were, I loved Hacksaw Duggan, and he worked in that spot, but not when he was the best looking fucking man on the roster, right? The kick-ass babyface was also the youngest, best looking guy. He had giants and football players and ugly heels and ugly baby faces and older guys and a slower style. And Jarrett and Lawler had both just made a fucking fortune off of rock and roll tag teams and young, good-looking baby faces that are fighting the odds against vicious fucking heels that cheat and lie and steal. And, it revolutionized that territory because it was such a departure. The same guys in Memphis that were in middle card, me and Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey, that the fans were used to, in a new environment, being presented a different way by a guy that learned booking from Jerry Jarrett, Bill Dundee. He gave him the record business year he'd ever fucking had. Because that was the personal issues draw money sign on the office wall was legitimate. And we've talked about it with the Southern wrestling discussion we had a week or two ago on one of the shows. Those guys, and you can go back to the Cal Farleys and Dutch Mantels in Amarillo, or the fucking Roy Welches in, Tennessee in the fucking 40s, and the Green Shadow Pat Malone. The cheating, lying, underhanded heel that would do something that by the 80s would become a wrestling trope, as they say, a foreign object or whatever the fuck. And in the 40s was getting cops hitting the ring in these fucking cow towns and arresting the heel for doing it because they weren't smart. And they fell into it, right? They got caught up in it. The personal issues, and the baby face has to fucking walk through hell with gasoline britches on to triumph over shit. But you want to be there when he does because you're on the road with him, right? It's not phony like sports entertainment where everybody is just in a soap opera and just emoting these goddamn long, drawn-out, dramatic monologues. And it's not legitimate sporting pro wrestling where everybody's just trying to compete for the title. It's kind of the flavor of this that was passed down from all these people is kind of like if your goddamn friends and neighbors around you were all had picked sides and were mad at each other for personal reasons, and somebody had pissed on somebody else's front yard or killed somebody else's dog or whatever the fuck, and you're watching them argue and fight, and you're into it. That's the essence of wrestling. And so, and again, he jump-started Watts' business with just the different talent that they had been using already. He was amazing. You mentioned this yesterday when we talked about it, first heard about it. Jerry was the first promoter of one of the major territories that grew up with television. Everybody else, they'd become adults before television became a thing, so they were already kind of involved in wrestling and put the wrestling on television. But since Jerry grew up with TV, he understood it better, and the television became the driving force to see the wrestling rather than just airing the wrestling you're already doing. You said it better.
Yeah, I mean, there weren't too many people. I mean, if you think about it, all the promoters, at least through the mid-'60s, were older guys, former wrestlers in a lot of cases, who were stars from a previous era. So TV comes in, look at the first generation of TV. It wasn't, go watch that Chicago stuff. It's great for in-ring action. There are no promos. There are no angles. The angles are just things that happen in the matches.
Yeah.
But eventually, the television presentation of wrestling, which I actually think to this day, when done right, is still the most effective way to present wrestling. What some may call studio wrestling, what Bill Watts didn't have a studio, was just a way to present wrestling so that people would want to be invested in it. And I think Jerry Jarrett, because he was younger and he grew up with TV, was able to approach that in a different way than a Roy Welch or a Nick Goulas would have.
Yeah, and Roy Welch was born in 1901. He was almost 50 years old before he ever saw television. But at the same time, the Southern promoters, and you can see Scott Teal, again, did a great Knoxville history book, and you can see some of the same things, especially the way they booked the Green Shadow with same finishes, same angles, the same kind of promotion of stipulations from week to week to juice things up. They were doing these things in the arenas in front of the people. They just all of a sudden now had a way to reach tons more people doing the same thing to get them to come to the arena. And then at the arena, they'd do something else to get them to want to watch TV the next week to see what the match was going to be announced and blah, blah, blah. And it fed on itself. But Jerry was, again, great with the way he used the legends and the way he made stars out of young guys you'd never heard of. And he placed more importance in the legends of the territory than, a lot of places did, because he knew that these fans had long memories anyway in this territory, and especially in, Memphis, where wrestling had been so big and popular for so long. So you could use that, and you could use that history that people had. And then when, 5 years after they revealed that Tojo was his mentor, for whatever reason, they turned Tojo heel on Jerry because he was disappointed in him, and he slapped him around. And it didn't work. Tojo was a babyface about 3 months later again. But what it did was show people that shit would happen. There would be a falling out. They could refer to it again, so they could tease that later on. Oh, gosh, things have happened before. He remembered history between. Lance Russell was perfect for that because he had been around to see all of it. So he would recognize the history of the guys or things they'd done, and at the same time, young guys. He didn't see, laying the trade with us. He didn't see Rick Rude as a green fucking, arm wrestler from Minnesota. He saw him as that guy with the washboard stomach and a good-looking fucking grin and mustache and swagger, and I can do something with that guy. And, whether Kamala we mentioned before, poor old Sugar Bear Harris wasn't getting booked, but Kamala wrestled Hulk Hogan in Madison Square Garden. He would take young guys that wanted a chance, because that's another way Jerry stayed in business. You were never going to be overpaid, and he was going to pretty much stay in business at first cost and take care of you later on. But the guys that were figured in made excellent money. Remember, when he sat me down at Channel 5, Jerry did, and asked me if I wanted to be a manager, he said, now it's a hard business. Some people don't make money and don't take care of their money. But Bill here has become a wealthy man, and I've made a fortune. Okay. But where was I going with that? The whole fucking thing was, he would make sure that the business stayed in business, but he would give young guys breaks, and you could work every night, and you could learn how to do this live TV in one take and get over in front of crowds live, and what worked and what didn't. And you're doing something different every week, and you're in the car with veterans constantly. And that's why so many guys either came here when they got started because they went through so much talent with weekly towns that they would, if a guy came in a couple months, he didn't work out, fuck, okay, give him his notice, bring somebody else in. And the thought was, when you came in, you would stay as long as you could so you could make some money and learn or whatever. But turnover was high, so many guys came through and learned shit, and or got a gimmick or a piece of advice or made a connection that later on made them fucking money in the wrestling business. Everybody from Hulk Hogan on down. And I'm trying to think, Jesus Christ, if you take into account everybody that Jerry Jarrett booked over the last 50 years, early in their career, it would be easier to list anybody who's been a big star until the last 10 or 15 years when it's all been developmental or whatever. To think of somebody that's been a big star that wasn't there than it was. And then we get to the 90s when Vince thinks he's going to prison. Who does he call? Try to take care of the business while he's going to be away boarding with the warden, Jerry Jarrett, who has told the story that Vince Sr. had talked to Jerry one time and said, my son's going to piss a lot of people off, and he's probably going to need you at some point. If you would take care of him, I'd appreciate it. And then Jerry goes up to Connecticut for that year and a half or what. He started drinking 2 bottles of wine every night. He said he knew it was time to go home. Everybody from the South hated moving to Connecticut. Everybody from Connecticut loved going to the South. But, and I know that our friend, the Artful Dodger, had tried to debunk that fact of what was happening after the fact, because Jerry didn't take Bruce seriously and treated him like the coffee boy. He had respect for Pat Patterson. He didn't take Bruce seriously. And I think it stung and wounded Bruce down to the quick. But Jerry was going to be the guy because Vince knew that Jerry Jarrett did not want to move to Connecticut and take over his fucking business in a hostile manner. He was at a wrestling mind that wasn't going to steal anything from him because he didn't want it and could be there temporarily to make sure that everything didn't fall into fucking chaos if Vince was behind fucking bars. And there weren't many people with that level of experience left in the business. So, and then once that Vince didn't go to prison, Jerry said, I'm ready to go back home. And he tried, remember, he also tried to buy, Jerry Jarrett offered those fucking idiots at TBS more than Vince paid for WCW. I can't remember what the offer was, but it was more than $4 million. And they wouldn't take it and sold it for less to Vince. People may say, oh, goddamn, they're thinking now it's a $6 billion company or that economics are different in this day and age, but Jerry Jarrett could have put together the financing to buy WCW in 2001. He fucking 1980 something, he was living in $1 million house in Hendersonville. I think he could have come up with more than $4 million. Imagine what that might have looked like.
I don't remember the timing of it, if that offer was before. It must have been before they found out that there was going to be no more television.
Yes,
Turner.
no, that's when there was a bunch of...
Bischoff had an offer out there with his group, right?
There's a bunch of chaos at the end where, okay, we'll buy it. Oh, wait, no TV, nobody will buy it. But
that led to the start of TNA.
Yeah, because and then, again, they come up with one investor, and that investor fucking pulls out with no notice. Remember Health South, because they got in the news for all kinds of financial improprieties, and they had bigger fish to keep out of prison. And they find another investor, old Dixie's daddy. But how many territories have the Jarrett family, territories or promotions or companies, have the Jarrett family started, most of which have been successful? How many satellite territories have they been responsible for at one point or another, been asked to come in and straighten out or help or whatever? And I know the Memphis territory folded in 97, and then Jerry's involvement has been sporadic. Well, the first couple of years were, if that long, with TNA, but still, just talking about his full-time run, he was a booker on and off, and of course, they would hand it off to Lawler sometimes, and then later on, Bill Dundee, who did a great job. But Jerry was a booker on and off for 30 years, from 67 to 97. He was not just a main event wrestler because he could put himself in the main event, but a main event wrestler that drew money for about 6 or 7 years run there. He ran Louisville Wrestling Enterprises, some of his own towns, for 27 straight years, and ran his own company where he was the boss of everything for 20 years. During that, he produced not only the Memphis wrestling program, that was not only the highest rated wrestling program in the United States, but the highest rated local television program in the United States. But he also, in the days of Goulas and Welch, booked and or appeared on some of their TVs, because we've talked about in Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama alone, they did 5 different television programs every week. And he was in charge of some of those. Then you factor in booking in Atlanta, the other companies, TNA starting from scratch, being involved with the W. And the reason why that Jerry Lawler was with the WWE today when he is because Jerry Jarrett made that commitment to go help Vince in 1992. And Lawler followed soon after, because why wouldn't you want your best talent on national television? I mean, who else has anywhere near this resume?
You talked earlier about how they talked to you, him and Bill Dundee, about becoming a manager. When was it the actual first conversation or the first time you spoke to Jerry Jarrett?
About that topic, or you don't
In
mean the
general.
first time I met him? The first time I spoke to him was, hello, Mr. Jarrett. No, in general, that was that day. It was Lawler and Flair in the Channel 5 studio that day in August 14, 1982. And I had driven all night to be there to take pictures because it was my girlfriend at the time's birthday the day before. And so I hadn't slept. And so as the show is winding up, I'm on my knees behind one of the cameras taking a picture, and a tap on my shoulder. I turn around, it's Jerry Jarrett. And I mean, obviously we spoke whenever Jerry would come to Louisville, obviously we would speak. I've taken pictures of him. You know, we've never sat down and had an in-depth conversation, because I, in those days, looked at him like, okay, this is the fucking boss. I'm on a, you know, if he needs to hear from me, he will, right? I'm not going to fucking go over to Jerry Jarrett and announce, hey, Jerry, I'm here, shake my hand. The fuck, that started later. But anyway, he taps me on the shoulder. I'm like, oh shit, did I do something? No, I want to talk to you. And he brought me back in one of the offices. He says, I've been having an idea. Have you ever thought about being a manager? And I'm thinking, okay, this is sleep deprivation. And I was hemming. He said, the reason I ask, and he told me he said, some of the guys have heard you doing I would do impersonations like all the guys did then of Jimmy Valiant or Terry Funk or whatever. And Teeny liked him, right? You know, do Terry Funk again, whatever. Anyway, so, and of course, he's told the story since then. He said if I could get as much heat with the fucking people as I got with the boys, he knew he had a moneymaker. But,
Did you really have heat with the boys?
Not really, but it's a nice line.
It is.
I think probably maybe every once in a while, if I was in the way somewhere, but nevertheless. But anyway, he said the Gary Hart gimmick, millionaire playboy. And I wasn't going to pull off the playboy part, but, you know, comes from a wealthy family, bought his way into. So then he said, go home and ask your mother, because she's going to be spoken of in ill repute on television. And if you want to, come back wearing a suit next week. And as a Dundee because Dundee was the booker then. And Dundee walks in, and that's when Jerry's in. And yeah, it's a hard business. Some guys don't make money. Some guys don't save their money. But Bill's a wealthy man, and I've made a fortune. Okay, I'll buy that.
You'd already been to his house by that point, right?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, the housewarming, I think, I've told this story a while back, but Teeny invited my mom and I to the housewarming because he had the big housewarming where he had that 18,000 square foot custom built mansion with an indoor ballroom, that pool outdoors. It's set on 100 acres on top of a mountain outside of Hendersonville, that he'd later on subdivided that fucking property and made a fortune with his construction business. He told me he made more money than he ever made in wrestling. And the wrestling money is what bought this son of a bitch. So he has the housewarming, and Eddie Graham comes and he's a guest, and you know, Bobby Bear, the country star, next door neighbor, plays in a tent in the backyard, and there's hundreds of people there. And I came wearing the fucking spiffy goddamn tuxedo to take pictures and everything. It looked like a high school graduation tuxedo, which it was, by the way. And like within a month, I think he got an idea that seeing me dressed up, he's like, this fucking heat getting son of a bitch, you can talk too. So, but nevertheless, and that's, you know, that's what started that. And he said, yeah, so come back next week wearing a fucking suit.
Hey, if I can ask you a question, because we've talked today and we've talked many times in the past about various lessons as a booker you could learn from Jerry Jarrett. And like you pointed out, he learned from the best. I mean, he was there with Eddie Graham after he'd already been a booker. In terms of business, what do you think are the important lessons as a businessman for the wrestling business that a promoter today could learn? I mean, one of the big ones you've talked about and guys have complained about over the years was you couldn't make money in Memphis because he was going to make sure that the promotion or himself were going to make money as opposed to him not making any money and everyone else getting all the money.
Right. And you could, the top guys could make money in Memphis. And we've talked about Lawler made a fucking fortune. And even the top guys that weren't figured into the office, you know, when business was hot, the Fabs were making $1,500 a week a piece on guarantee and a couple grand a week a piece on fucking pictures and t-shirts in the 80s. So, you know, you could make money, but it was not one of the higher paying territories. But nevertheless, your question was, what can other promoters
in terms of how you utilize your capital and your money on a show? What do you think people could learn from that?
Well, you know, and here's the thing is there are differences in the territory days and now, but there can be some lessons learned. We've talked when Lawler would take over the book, Jerry didn't like to say no to people, and he would end up with 35 guys on the card in Memphis on a Monday night. When Dundee would have the book, he would book it more like Jerry would. If you can't get the fucking people to come to see a card with 16 or 18 guys on it, well, then you've just shit the bed. You know, so, and especially in those days, there were no guarantees per se, written contracts or a guarantee per night or whatever. Promoters would have verbal guarantees with their top guys for a week that they would meet or exceed that. And that was kind of a loose verbal deal. But when you paid guys based on the house, you would shave the payoff down accordingly, but Jerry wouldn't allow and most time, and he'd yank a knot in Lawler's tail, the payroll to get so ridiculous that even if you were giving the guys the $50 minimum, you were paying too much because there was 40 guys on a fucking card. Also, again, a cardinal rule of promoting wrestling is don't imagine that everybody knows who everybody is and everybody's already intending to come. You need to give them a reason to, and you need to make sure they know about it, and you need to make sure that they know who everybody is and why they're mad at the person they're fighting. And not necessarily the Gary Hart line, repetition is the key when dealing with goofs, but the reinforcement of who everybody is and what their standing is. And you keep your faith in your baby faces or heels. There were a lot of turns in Tennessee wrestling because with weekly events, you had to keep turning things around, but they wouldn't just turn anybody but Jimmy Valiant. He was the fucking bulletproof guy. He could turn back and forth because people just loved him. But they wouldn't turn guys back and forth until they meant nothing. They just send them out somewhere else and bring them back again later on fresh. So, you know, turning over talent. But again, I said the other day, it's not about giving the fans what they want to see that they come up with. We were talking about Tony Khan, because they've made a number of their favorites in AEW organically over and they've dropped the ball on it. It's not that you give the fans everything they want to see. When the fans are reacting to somebody, yes, you take that and run with it and give them more reason to be into that individual. But the bigger art to wrestling is educating the fans to what you want them to want based on what you can provide and the parameters and the limitations you may be working with. If you basically sneak the idea by your programming and your booking of what they want into their head and then give them what they want, because you've already told them what it was, because it's what you can give them. That kind of shit worked for a long time in Tennessee. And that's why, again, a lot of people that didn't watch it regularly grow up with it in the time period concurrently and understand it. They just look at the tape and they go, what the fuck? People took this seriously? But yes, they fucking did. Because it was all at the root of it. It was all personal. It wasn't the things that happened amongst the guys may have gotten fantastical, but it happened for a reason that everybody could understand. Jealousy, greed, avarice, pride, lust, shit like that.
Do you think too many people see some of the moments of Lawler's, mostly Lawler stuff, like a Dr. Frank thing, and they think that somehow exemplifies an entire generation of Memphis wrestling TV?
Yeah, I'm afraid they do. Much as some people just can't get over that I worked with a guy in a Ninja Turtle costume on a spot show in front of 300 people because he was my best friend, and that way we could get to wrestle. And the kiddies would enjoy it because he was a turtle.
See, you started All Friends Wrestling.
Well, there you go. But that is a point, is that a lot of people see the wackier stuff and think, oh, well, it was all good. But I just tweeted a clip that somebody had put together of Lawler and Terry Funk in 1990 when Pedicino was doing the global thing, and they were taping with, and that's another when Joe Pedicino thought he had $30 million to form the Global Wrestling Federation. He went to Jerry Jarrett and did TV and used Jarrett's talent, blah, blah, blah. But they tweeted like a 2-minute clip of Lawler and Funk just beating the shit out of each other. This is when both of them were in their 40s. And it looked better than anything that you see on television today, more aggressive and more violent. And it's just because they knew what the fuck they were doing. And it felt more personal. That's the kind of stuff that drew money in the Tennessee territory. While Lawler was a movie monster fan, Dundee, you couldn't have got Dundee to goddamn book Dr. Frank if you'd have held a gun on him. And Lawler couldn't wait to fucking get the mask out. But Jarrett kept control of the whole thing for long enough that if anything ever got sideways for too long, he would take control of it. And when Robert Fuller left and went back to Knoxville in 79, when that whole thing happened, and Jarrett was left with Lawler, Dundee, and 8 guys that really didn't make a shit. He brings Jackie Fargo back in Rough House, and he shoots the Tupelo concession stand brawl with Wayne Ferris and Larry Latham, and triples the business in 3 weeks from all of the names that Robert Fuller had, and Tanaka and Gorgeous George Jr. and the Mongolian Stomper and Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden. All those guys leave, and 3 weeks later, they've tripled the fucking business with a bunch of nobodies and Buddy and Ken Wayne. That's, when he had to come in and straighten something out, he'd do it.
Jim, if I could ask, do you have any favorite Jerry Jarrett expressions or sayings? Because the one that I always remember, I forget who exactly it was about, but it was you saying, or him saying to someone, him saying to you about someone.
How about just step out? Just step away from the story and let me tell it. I came into Memphis TV when I'd just started managing, and Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, was with me. He had come down to take pictures for the magazines because he was a photographer at that point for the magazines, but also everybody knows we've talked about Brian getting involved with Dom DiNucci's wrestling school early on and et cetera, and he had worked some early independents, but he had just been refereeing for Buddy Fuller, who had opened up some towns in Ohio, Dayton and somewhere else, and was using Jerry's talent, and they were business partners. So he's been refereeing. So I think, okay, he's with me. We go into TV, and he comes in the back door with me. And he goes out to the studio to, get his camera bag unpacked or whatever. And Jerry Jarrett comes over to, who was that with you? I said, well, that's Brian Hildebrand. I think I said, oh, don't worry, he's smart to the business. And I was about to explain who he was. And Jerry said, I don't care if he's smart to the business. He's not smart to my business. Yes, sir. And we went out the front door, both of us, that day. He protected the business because it was his, and he had to be there when everybody else was gone, right? But there were, the personal issues draw money that we said, and he may be smart to the business, but he's not smart to my business. That's another saying, but it was just his way of explaining, and I'm not doing a very good job of it, but his way of explaining or imparting what he wanted you to do, he could see it in his head. I give finishes more like Bill Dundee, because Dundee's more high strung like I am. And Dundee would go through the thing where he would start acting it out in the locker room and you'd be blowed up watching him, right? Jerry was laid back and calm, and he talked slow, and he'd have that spit cup, because all the guys in the early 80s, him and Eddie Marlin and Dundee, whoever else, are chewing Red Man. And he would sit, and when he would give you a finish as the booker, he never told you a wrestling move to do in the finish. That was immaterial. He gave you the story of the finish and who was supposed to do what and what your reaction should be and how to milk thing. It would be descriptive, like, and when the babyface turns around and sees that, well, you can't believe it, and the shock is on your face, and you let people see you can't believe it and build the anticipation till then you grab that no good manager. And like I said, he wouldn't give wrestling moves unless it was a move that needed to be reversed for the finish, something specific. He said, get heat on the guy, and finally, when it's time to go home, slip on a banana peel, give him his opportunity, set up the hot tag. He was big on hot tags and building the hot tag to the point where it's the most important thing in the world for that babyface to get to that corner, and he has to walk through hell. And when you finally set it up and it happens, that's why I'm so bullshit about cold tags. There has to be almost no way for that put-upon babyface to get to his corner and make a tag. It's obvious that there's no way he can make it. The heels are in between him and his partner. He's down, they're up. It would take a miracle. And then the miracle happens. That's why the goddamn tag is hot. But he would give, his finishes were logical. Things would happen based on what was happening around you and what you would do. You were reacting instead of acting. And so he didn't care what wrestling moves the guys used, as long as they got heat and as long as they had a big comeback and a hot tag, those things. He let the wrestlers call the plays, but he gave you the story and the emotion and what the finish was supposed to accomplish, so that next week when we come back with the stipulation to prevent that fucking whatever the fuck happened to screw the baby face, the people will understand it. This time's going to be, the only reason you beat me last week was because of such and such. You have soap in my eyes, or a foreign object, or brass knuckles, or the manager interfered, or whatever the case may be. Well, this week's stipulation will nullify all of that. And that's why they kept coming back. And it was the same thing that he learned from Roy Welch, which was the same thing that he learned from Cal Farley and Dutch Mantell, which is the same thing that they figured out in fucking West Texas in 1918. Manipulate people's emotions, milk their reactions, get somebody that they love sideways with somebody that they can't stand, that they hate, and have those people have a conflict and prolong it as long as you can. And finally, in the end, good, hopefully most of the time, triumphs, and somebody worse than the other bad guy comes in to take his place. That's the element, that's the foundation of wrestling. And that's what they were still doing in the Tennessee territories in the 70s and 80s. That was the closest thing you could come to the pioneer days, because a guy that was there when all this stuff was invented had been in charge for the previous fucking 50 years. But anyway, having said that, like we said, I guess the only other thing to say is he was probably the most important wrestling promoter left alive, not named Vince McMahon, in terms of longevity and success and impact he had on a variety of businesses and tons of future wrestling talent.
You know, I'm sitting here thinking about it. You're one of the very few people, one of the last people, or just one of the very few in general, that could say you as a booker. Trained or learned, however you want to, learned is probably the more appropriate term.
Yeah.
Jerry Jarrett.
He never sat down and said, "Here, Jim, I'm going to show you all this shit."
Right.
What you did was,
But
if you were smart, you opened your eyes and ears and paid a lot of attention.
But Jerry Jarrett, Bill Watts, Dusty Rhodes, Vince McMahon, you have to put him on that list too.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to go back a little ways, we could say George Scott at one time, but wouldn't maybe belong on this list. But when it comes to booking, is there anything they all had in common? Because they all had their differences as bookers. Is there anything they all had in common?
A lot of success in their own individual ways. You know, Watts was never going to go for the outrageousness of Memphis wrestling because he was more serious-minded, and his approach worked, especially in his territory, because, I mean, look at the heat. The heels had more heat in Louisiana because of Watts' style of booking than anywhere else probably in the country. With Dusty, it was a combination of, because Watts learned from Eddie Graham, so did Dusty. But Dusty learned the big show package. Watts was a hard-nosed football player and a, straight-minded fucking pro athlete type of guy. Dusty was an entertainer. And he learned the package show and having strong cards up and down the thing from Eddie Graham. But at the same time, you can see that Dusty also learned the crazy angles, the guys getting their clothes stripped off that they saw in Florida, that he did in Florida, that he learned from Eddie Graham, that they did in Memphis, because they did it. A lot of this stuff is now going back to West Texas because Eddie Graham, one of his first main event spots that we talked about, was working for Dory Funk Sr. in West Texas.
Rip Rogers.
And as Rip Rogers. And Dory Funk Sr. was brought along, and Cal Farley was still around when Dory Funk Sr. was the top guy in West Texas. Dutch Mantell, I believe, died right about the time that Funk got there. But, we're finding a lot of this, the most influential people in the business and the people who most grasped the concept of manipulating emotions in wrestling all kind of came through a similar path and interacted with a lot of the same people at the start. But you had the differences. I mean, everybody, all those bookers had their differences, but Jerry Jarrett was more willing to open up to wild shit because, like I said, weekly territory, and also he was never the guy that he wanted to protect the legitimacy of the business in terms of, not wanting people to know that it's a work, but he wasn't one of these people who wanted to shove. And this is where some people have a misconception with me that, he just wants 15-minute headlocks. Jerry Jarrett didn't want to shove athletic wrestling down to people's throats when they didn't want to buy it. He put it on the card like Eddie Graham did so that you would have a baseline. And then when the crazy shit happened, well, those guys are out of control. And usually it's in the main events and all of blah, blah, blah. But he wasn't as hard-nosed as like a Vern Gagne. Oh, God, let's take him in the barn and stretch him for several years.
I never thought of it in that way. It's so interesting the way you just put it, as a baseline. Because that's one of the things that feels like wrestling's kind of lost. The idea that there's a baseline and then you go above it in the big moments.
Yeah, no, there's nothing now. It's just uncontrolled chaos for the length of the program, pretty much, where nobody's in charge of anything and there's no actual baseline here so you can deviate from normal behavior to get a response. Because everything is accepted. You're not surprised at anything anymore. So therefore, you're not watching a car crash. You're watching a highlight film of car crashes. So that's something the old bookers understood. Hot shotting. Do it when it's necessary to get your fucking eyeballs back on your product. But if you go too far, you've killed yourself. And if you get in a point where you have to really hot shot, instead of just wanting to do a big show every once in a while, then you probably shit the bed anyway. but certain times it's necessary, like the Tupelo concession stand brawl. Now, if they'd have done that, 3 weeks in a row, then people would have said, fuck. Because remember, they did it another couple of times and it didn't work like the first one because people had seen it.
And that was once every year, and that was too much.
Yeah, and that, actually twice over the next 3 years, and it was still too much. But that's, restraint, logic, protect the business in terms of the integrity of it, as far as we don't want people to know how we're doing this, but you've got to have craziness, and the people will accept it if you pick the right talent because they can get it over and make it natural.
You brought up that he would be willing to accept some of the crazier things. Andy Kaufman was a pretty crazy idea that was already rejected, and he accepted
it. Because again, it was kind of tailor-made for Memphis wrestling. And, the thought was, well, let's not turn down a network television star because he might be able to sell us some tickets. But then you had Lawler that could speak to those people and make them believe that he was giving you his true emotions on the situation. This guy's making fun of my business, and regardless of what you think of it, I take it seriously, and I'm going to make a point of hurting him. And meanwhile,
you remember the great quote? I love this quote. Do you think you're going to hurt Andy Kaufman? I think I have to hurt Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, I think I have to hurt him. It's, so they created a situation where no matter what you thought of wrestling, here's some comedian that's taking it fucking like a joke and all in fun, and he's playing wrestler. And here's the guy that we've seen for the past 10 years every Monday night beat everybody in the fucking business. Is now being made to look a fool by this fucking skinny, guy that's knocking us and insulting us. That is perfect for Jerry Jarrett's philosophy of everybody can understand that. Everybody, it's not far-fetched. Everybody could easily identify with it. And that's another thing. Remember, I said that was the thing that I got from the start from Jerry Jarrett talking about interviews, especially for baby faces, because heels can lie and exaggerate and brag and be assholes, but especially for baby faces, but a lot of times for heels. Tell the fans in your interviews as much of the truth as you possibly can, that they know to be true, that are points of whatever that's not in dispute, so that then when you do start working, they won't be able to tell maybe where you left off. Well, wait a minute. He said this and this and this, and I know that's true. Those are facts. And now he's saying that don't just start out bullshitting people and say, yeah, I just got back from the moon and I'm going to kick your ass. No. Everybody knows there's been problems between me and Dundee, Lawler might say. Because even when there was natural professional jealousy, and even when they were, with the fans at the McDonald's or the liquor store or whatever afterwards, Dundee for the liquor store, Lawler for the McDonald's. When they were both baby faces, they'd knock each other behind their backs or make little snide remarks or whatever. People knew, right? So then, whenever it was time to switch one of them, they could just, everybody knows there's been a long history between me and Bill or whatever, and they would buy it. It wasn't hard. It wasn't difficult. Just whoever the fuck you are, keep being that person. And how would you react to shit? But nevertheless, again, that, before all this chaos, like you said, a baseline, before all this chaos, these guys had to, whether it be Jerry Jarrett or Eddie Graham or Dusty or whoever the fuck we were talking about, they had to come up with shit every week for TV and every week for shows that kept the fans' attention, that the people believed in enough that they would pay to see the resolution of or what was going to happen. And under basically the only parameters is don't let people know that we're fucking lying to them and act like this is all legitimately happening. Otherwise than that, you'd create whatever you wanted. And it worked for fucking 100 years.
You need a baseline with the commentators, too.
Yes, because if they're having a hernia about everything, anyway, but that's a topic for another day. But I sure do. Me personally, if it hadn't been for Jerry's mother, I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere around the wrestling business. And if it hadn't been for Jerry, I, maybe still would be a ringside photographer. Well, I wouldn't, because there's no fucking wrestling unless I wanted to travel the goddamn world. So I might be a fucking radio DJ or a newspaper person by now. If it wasn't for Jerry saying, hey, you ever thought about being a manager? Well, sure, I've thought about a lot of this shit, but seriously, ever? No. But that's the thing. He could see shit. So, that's why I've always tried to work with whatever, Jeff had that was going on to help him in some respect, because if it hadn't been for both Jerry and Teeny, I wouldn't have been in the wrestling business at all, ever. So I'm sorry that both of them are gone now.
It goes to show you, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever hear your boss is having a party, rent a tuxedo. Show up.
And make it powder blue with a bow tie.
No, it wasn't, was it?
Oh, it was, baby.
Oh, I thought it was at least black. It was powder blue.
I went in and saw that. I said, tuxedo? Well, I'm fucking 19 or whatever. I was tuxedo. Well, that one looks great. They knew I was a gimmick from day one. I just didn't know it.
Jim, let's talk about some other things happening in the world of wrestling this past week. And I know this is another one of those weeks where you watched Monday Night Raw.
Well, boy, the depressing things just keep on coming. Yes, I watched Raw is Talk again this week, and we'll quickly run through a few things and then spend some time on one or two. But again, I think this is worse than last week. When I'm going to try to skip ahead here in my notes in a second because I'm going to spoil something. Bing, bing, bing. Here's one note. I don't want to see any more of this show.
When did you? Hold on. We have to figure out when you said that. Is that the game?
It was right after the top of the 10 o'clock hour.
Oh, the game's over. All right.
So basically, at where is my notes? By the time the main event started, 2 hours and 40 minutes into the program, we were at 17 minutes of wrestling. I'll skip ahead and let you know that. So the first segment, Becky Lynch was in the ring with Adam Pearce, and Adam Pearce his name was mentioned. He got a mixed response from the crowd, a few pleasant claps and some hoots and catcalls. And she's doing a promo about Bayley, and then here comes Bayley out wearing a parka. Was she wearing a parka? What was that? Was that a what do they call those sweaters the Malamutes wear up in Alaska?
The Malamutes?
I don't know. Aren't the Malamutes are a people that live in the cold? Or is that a dog? I can't remember. They're up there in Alaska.
It's getting mighty cold in here right now.
Maybe they're the native people of Alaska, the Malamutes. So she comes out wearing this fucking parka, and they both want to be in the women's elimination chamber, and there's a back and forth argument, and somehow Bianca comes out twirling and skipping. And Bianca's thing was she had been listening to Becky and Bayley, and she disagrees. She thinks that they should have to go through her to get to her. Did you hear that?
I did hear that, actually.
So the deal is that they're fighting over one of them supposed to be wants to be in the elimination chamber, and to get a chance to meet Bianca. But Bianca thinks that they should fight her to get the chance to be in the elimination chamber to fight her.
That is indeed what she said, yes.
Okay, so Adam Pearce made it a triple threat. And if Bianca wins, then neither of them get in the elimination chamber. But if Becky or Bayley win, then whoever wins is added to the elimination chamber, I think. So then, if either Becky or Bayley tonight on Raw can beat Bianca or the other, because it's a triple threat, then they will get into an elimination chamber match against 5 other people where the winner of that will get a chance to face Bianca.
And who says Tony Khan's not an influential booker?
You know what? That's what they did. They mixed up their columns. Columns went out instead of down, right. And they got all flummoxed there. At least the promo was only 10 minutes.
They put up a graphic for that Elimination Chamber match, and I immediately started thinking, if they want me to watch it, they better add Becky or Bayley to that match, because there's no star power other than Rhea.
Well,
Rhea's not even in the Elimination Chamber. She's in the mixed tag.
No, she's
match.
In the mixed tag. Yeah. Which is why I'm saying they got to have a women's Elimination Chamber. So, speaking of Rhea, the Judgment Day was in the back doing a promo, and Damian Priest says he's going to win the Elimination Chamber. I think he's going to beat up Piper Niven and fucking Liv Morgan in the elimination. Oh, hey, there's a men's Elimination Chamber, too. It's so confusing. But Mommy is still traveling the world. She's not there. And tonight they're going to wrestle the Street Profits. And that son of a bitch is exactly what happened. After the break, there we go, Judgment Day versus Street Profits. Do they not do this every week?
Yes, they do it every week.
Even when it's different people, it feels like they're doing the same thing every week. So the bell rang 20 minutes into the show for the first match, and they went under 2 minutes, and we went to a break. And they came back, and we went 3 more minutes, and Finn Balor won with a foot stomp on old Daryl Dawkins. And then suddenly, boom, they start getting heat on the baby faces, even though they just won. And then here comes Edge and Beth. And the energy picked up. It was the best 60 seconds of the show so far coming up because they get the big schmaz. Edge is fucking throwing punches. Beth gets a hold of Dominic, and then here comes Mommy. Rhea Ripley from behind into the ring, not supposed to be anywhere in the building, and gives Beth the old pump handle. And Edge comes back in to save her, and they bail out. The heels do. That was the best 60 seconds so far. What'd you think?
I wanted to see her beat up Dominic. I wanted to see what was going to happen there.
Well, see, but we didn't get it yet. We still got to wait for it.
Do you think we're going to get Beth beating up Dominic in that match?
I think we almost have to, don't we?
Sound like Lawler.
I think we almost have to. Because why else would the world still go round? So that'll be interesting then at the Elimination Chamber. The mixed tag. I'm looking forward to that. We'll see what happens. And then how long has it been, Brian, since we've had a big-time contract signing on WWE television?
Weeks.
No, actually, no, it hadn't. It has only been a week.
Has it been a week? What was the last one?
It's been a week since the last one. Remember when Brock fucking signed the contract?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Before that, it had been at least 2 weeks before that. Brock and Lashley are going to try it again with Adam Pearce with another contract signing. And, of course, they show the angle last week, and Brock makes his entrance. And here is why Brock Lesnar is over, because he always seems out of control, even when you know he's in control. He's a beast that won't obey or that might go into business for himself or who knows what the fuck he's going to do. And he's just a badass, right? And one that just a little thing. He doesn't go in and pick one of those big overstuffed chairs up for the contract signing and pick it up over his head and make a big show, Hulk smash, and throw it out. He just grabs the fucking thing and flings it out like it's a goddamn 6-ounce plastic chair and lets it go flying to ringside. And people, oh, shit. He fills up his fucking space when he's in the ring, when he's on camera, when he's on television. He takes control of the situation. That's why Brock Lesnar is over. And he calls out Lashley. He says, I've already signed a contract last week. Get your ass out here. And then they play Lashley's music, and a dozen security members come out and line the aisle like the honor guard or the fucking the guards over there at Buckingham Palace when they're doing the march out and the changing of the guard with the fluffy fucking possum hats on or whatever. So it's obviously gimmick security, and I don't know why they can't make them look a little more legitimate, but nevertheless, Lashley sets up, or they have set up, a table and chairs in the entranceway, and then here comes Lashley out in a suit, and he's a full heel. And again, I guess they just decided, well, this wasn't working, so we'll just, in the course of 2 or 3 weeks, Bobby will just become a prick again. So he's doing the heel promo. Every time I've faced you, I've beaten or eliminated you. You know, he's wearing a suit where Brock's out there looking like the farmer. He's got the security in front of him. He's got his own special table. And then he says he had everybody look at the contract. My lawyer, my manager, my handler, my trainer, my kids. And I don't know if I'm going to sign it or not. And were the fans chanting Bobby's gay?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
There was a chant that came up, and I'm trying to, again, I couldn't hear it well, but the people were chanting, and it sounded like Bobby's gay. It would pertain to nothing that had been said. I don't know. But anyway, they're already on him. Point is, they've taken Brock's side. They're already on Lashley, the way he's acting and the heelishness, so this is working. And thankfully, I think they may save Bobby, switching him back heel. And Brock says, well, I'll just come down there and beat your ass and make you sign the contract. And Bobby said, you don't have the balls. And here goes Brock, and he dumps several of the security guards, and the rest of them just said, fuck it, and didn't make a move. And he charges Lashley, and Lashley backdrops him right on the fucking floor, full backdrop, and then dropped down and hit him with the spear. This time, Brock goes down and is selling. So now we get a little tit for the tat. Poor Bobby's been a floor mat here past few times, but now boom, and he signs the contract and drops it on Brock. So nice little segment there for Elimination Chamber. Bobby didn't have to talk too long. Got a little action. This wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. What'd you think?
Wasn't the worst thing. I was kind of hoping MVP was going to come out with Lashley, so I was a little disappointed that he didn't.
It's early yet.
I know. Otherwise, I can't complain too much.
Can't complain.
This is one of the better things on the show. I can't complain about it.
Yeah, and folks, it's headed downhill from here. The next match on the wrestling program was Piper Niven versus Mia Yim. And the bell rang, let's see, for the second match of the night, 50 minutes into the show. And in under 2 minutes, Piper Niven hit the black hole slam on Mia Yim, 1, 2, 3. I guess, well, when Abyss did it, it was the black hole slam. Is that misogynistic to call it a black hole slam when Piper Niven is doing it, or am I opening myself up to, it's the name of the move?
They should give it to Nia Jax. She can call it the My Hole Slam.
Well, there you go. So we have had the first match we saw for about 4 minutes, and the second match we saw under 2 minutes, but now we're at the top of the 9 o'clock hour. And remember, that's a place where we got to get some good programming in, right? You know, we got to have a star in the ring or a star on camera. We've talked about that, these top of the hour. So they come to the top of the 9 o'clock hour, and they're in the back with Baron von Corbin. And I'm just ready to, my God, they fucked up. They're running behind, or the timing is off, or whatever. It's 9 o'clock. And just as I say that, the girl interviewer had asked him a question about JBL firing him, and he started to open his mouth, and she said, wait a minute, something important is happening in the arena. They go,
Important.
And they go to, and there's Sami Zayn in the ring in a hoodie with a microphone. And then right at the top of 9 o'clock, I'm okay, they meant to do this, but fucking Corbin, Jesus Christ, man. Just pack your bags and walk on out the door. Just turn around now. You're not welcome anymore. So the people were on their feet for Sami Zayn. And they're excited, and he announces that he needs to talk to Cody Rhodes, and boom, the people pop. And he said, please indulge me and come out. Brian, what was it I said about a week or so ago that between now and WrestleMania, Cody Rhodes and Sami Zayn, as far as the people are concerned, need to be the best of friends and supporting one another and pulling for one another. And son of a gun, wouldn't you know who won that pony? They play the Cody music and the fans pop for him. There wasn't like boos because, oh gosh, it's him and Sami. They did the whoa for his entrance. Everybody's got a whoa in their music now. And the fans chanted Cody. Both of these guys are baby faces. And the story was, and they did, again, this was the segment on Raw. If you needed to see anything, you needed to see this. Everything else leave a bad taste in your mouth. But this was tremendous. And Sami Zayn's story was that he's heard Cody say that it's looking more and more like he's going to face Sami Zayn at WrestleMania instead of Roman Reigns. And Sami wanted to know, did he believe that? And Cody said he did mean it, that Sami could be and most likely will be his opponent at WrestleMania. And the fans are chanting, this is awesome, this is awesome. And then Cody starts giving him the talk. Respectfully, does it matter what I believe? Do you believe that you can beat him? And Sami's like, well, do you want the truth? And then now the fans are singing the ole, 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 ole. That's a deep cut. He hadn't been Generico in 10 years now or whatever.
They were in New York.
Well, there you go. And Sami said the truth is, I don't know. And again, this is like a Jerry Jarrett angle because it's wrestling. And with guys that can talk and pull it off. Because he's saying what, you would be thinking. I don't know. I've seen Roman up close. And the group, they always find a way. And he's as good as he says he is. He's in God mode. And I've been watching guys bigger and stronger than me going down. And Sami was great here. He's doubting his chances. And he says, I believe I'm capable of beating him. I believe I'm capable of becoming champion. I'm worthy of it. Yes, I believe that. But will I? I don't know. And then now Cody is put in a position of being Big Brother. This is brilliant. He's giving him a pep talk. Everybody here, all the fans, know that you can. Montreal knows you can. There's dissension in the bloodline because of you. Cracks in the armor because of you. And then Cody looks at him and says, I intend to finish my story. You need to finish yours. I don't want to see you on Raw next Monday. I'd rather see you at WrestleMania. Again. They're friends now. There's not going to be a backlash because they obviously have realized what was going to happen, and they're working this to the point where whatever happens, it seems like the people are going to be in support of Cody supporting Sami, Sami supporting Cody, Cody and Sami supporting each other. And I bet you the first one there to shake Cody Rhodes' hand will be Sami Zayn. And that's the way you do it. Uh-huh.
2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks in a row, they used Cody in the perfect way. They didn't use him too much. Unfortunately, the rest of the show suffers because this is the one segment that's good, and the ratings are now bearing that out too, that more people want to see this kind of stuff. It's weird because Cody, in a lot of ways, is so similar to Cody in AEW, and it didn't work. And so much of it felt forced. Nothing right now feels forced.
And, and I'm sure a lot of the creative team is going to, the best ratings of the show was for a promo. So let's do more promo. There's the problem. The whole show is a promo now. It's the promo with the people that can talk, that the people are interested in hearing talk. Not just because it's a promo. And they have, the matches could not even be possibly any less important. And there's where you get in trouble because you can't have guys talking for 3 hours, even though they do already. And the problem is they've got 20% of the amount of people watching this they did 15 years ago when everybody wasn't talking all the fucking time. And I'm a fucking manager. If it wasn't for promos, I'd have been out of business. But you can't do it for fucking 2 hours and 40 minutes out of a 3-hour program. Anyway, 20 minutes after Baron von Corbin was last addressed, they go back to him in the back. And his story is that I'm better off without JBL holding me down and giving me bad advice. And he's pissed off at Sami Zayn for interrupting him and this whole thing with Cody. And he starts knocking Cody. And they're behind Corbin. Cody comes through the curtain like he's just done his promo. And he starts hearing this where Corbin's knocking him. And finally said, I didn't like Dusty either. And Cody blows into him and fucking tackles him. And boom, 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 they fight out into the arena. And Cody's still in his suit, and he's stripping off pieces as we go. And they go to the ring, and the bell rings, and they have wildness for, a minute and a half or whatever, around ringside. Fought on the announce desk. Cody hits the crossroads. Boom, 1, 2, 3. And this was a great bit, and it was different, and it woke people up and got their attention, and the guy's fighting in a fucking suit. And it needed to be 2 minutes or less because of the presentation of it. And this was at least a little different and again, something else for Cody to do. And it was impromptu and looked impromptu down to the point where Cody, as he goes by, tells the referee, get your ass out there. We're going to have a fucking match. But at the same time, we're now, Jesus Christ, are we at 9:30? And we've had a good promo segment and 60 seconds of nice action with Edge and Beth and this 2 minutes in an hour and a half. What'd you think there?
I mean, back to the Cody and Sami thing, I really love that. And I think they've done a really good job of building up anticipation what could happen this weekend in Montreal. The thing with Corbin, I thought it was kind of funny they returned to him after cutting him off earlier, which was just perfect the way it was done.
What do you think he's done? For going from, do you think they just got mad? Well, the thing with JBL ain't working. Fuck, he's still the shits, whatever. So let's just humiliate him until he, fucking sticks his head in the sand and leaves in disgrace?
I really don't know. He said something, I think in this promo here, that someone on Twitter posted, it's actually true. He was the last guy to beat Roman Reigns in 2019.
Boy, it says more about his career than it does Roman's, doesn't it?
Not to pick on Baron Corbin, because I actually think at times when it wasn't too silly or anything, he was pretty good in the role of the bum.
Liked was it the homeless bum you liked?
Yeah.
Or and then when he got One Money in Las Vegas, it killed the whole thing.
It killed it. He was a fantastic homeless man. And then once he got Madcap Moss, it killed off everything he had. But using him as an example, and knowing you're WWE and you have so many people on TV, off TV, and NXT, and just signed, why are some of these guys still on TV I don't think anyone's like, oh, Baron Corbin's on, I got to see that. It's just filler. There are certain people that are just filler on that show because they've been there too long and used in a certain way. I just think it kind of drives off anyone who's watched that show in the last few years when they see these people.
They have 100 and something people under contract, as we counted one time, and any of 60 of them could do what the fuck was just done without, but I don't know.
It's okay not to have a comedy jerk-off character on the roster. They always feel it always seems like they need that guy on that show for some reason. But now,
what do you mean that guy? How about those guys? How many comedy fucking jerk-offs we're about to get to more comedy jerk-offs. The whole roster is comedy jerk-offs. That's what's the matter with the program.
Cody Rhodes, what are your thoughts on how he's been used so far?
Brilliant. This is perfect. Again, the fans have organically got behind Sami Zayn, that word that's being used so much lately. And they were in danger of it was Bryan Danielson and Roman Reigns several years ago, right? That the people wanted Danielson and the office wanted Roman, and there was issues. Well, now the people are behind both of the top baby faces that are both working in their own way, independent of each other, and now together to bring an end to the reign of terror of the longest running champion and the blah, 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 and the bloodline. This is perfect. And the fans are not booing either Cody or Sammy.
Just to play fantasy booker, since the pay-per-view, have we heard or seen anything from, about say Steen, from Kevin Owens?
I don't think so.
I mean, it's Montreal. He's got to play a part in it somehow, either helping Sammy or suddenly turning on Sammy.
Oh, if he's not booked on the show, he'll hit the ring on as a shoot to be on the show with Montreal, Steen. So yeah, and see, that's again, then you've got some intrigue. If they have Zayn and Owens against the Usos, but the relationship between Sammy and Jay now. So there's all kinds. It's very interesting.
Well, the other thing is,
for once,
those two want a WrestleMania match at some point. What if Owens turns on Sammy in Montreal, in their hometown? I don't know. It's an interesting what if.
I don't know about that. Because I don't think they're going to take Owens in the bloodline. I don't think that Heyman can afford the sushi and steak. But anyway, so the next match was Carmella, Nikki, and Asuka against Raquel and Liv and Natalya. And the bell rang an hour and a half into the show, and we've had less than 10 minutes of action in 3 matches, one of them unscheduled. And in this match, they go 2 minutes and went to the break. And then they came back, and in under 2 minutes, Oscar's team won. So now we're at 4 matches, 1 unscheduled, and we're still under around about 14 minutes. And then they did some comedy in the back with Otis. I put comedy in quotation marks. Otis and Shoosh Boy and the models and Maxine Dupree. There was Mansoir and Monsway. And I thought everybody involved in this, except the girl, should have quit on the spot when asked to do this, just out of pride, if nothing else. The girl shouldn't have a job to begin with, so what the fuck? She can do anything. It's just... And then they expect people not to change the channel when Gable and Otis stumble out, when they present Otis as this blithering dipshit and Gable as Shoosh Boy. And they're interacting with, and they couldn't. I know Vince came back, but would he notice if they just took the models off television now that, LA Knight's not a part of it? Does anybody give a shit about the rest of them?
No.
So then, Bronson Reed versus Muhammad Ali.
Mustafa Ali is how they pronounce it.
Well, he must have pissed somebody off because they were pushing him for a while, and now they just fucking squashed him in less than 3 minutes. The bell rang at 9:48 p.m. Eastern. We're at about 13 minutes of wrestling over 4 matches. Again, this should have been a squash match. I love Bronson Reed. That splash off the top rope is badass. But a pattern is developing here. Entrances take forever. Interviews take forever. Packages take forever. The matches, let's get this over with as quickly as possible.
One of the problems I have watching this and this show, and after that Cody segment, the show kind of felt like it was over. Whether you want to believe that or not, after that Cody segment, it felt like it was over.
Yeah.
It felt like time for bed.
Now, I was getting very sleepy, is what I was doing. I was starting to nod off into blissful dreamland, into somnambulism. And you know why I was doing that, don't you, Brian?
No.
Because of those no good, sorry son of a guns over at Helix Sleep.
No, they're good people. Don't say that.
No, they make such great mattresses, you can't stay awake on these things.
Well, that's true.
That's the problem is, as a matter of fact, I am now sleeping between 16 and 18 hours every day. Simply because once you I don't care if you sit down on it, you put your butt on it, you're going to sleep. You're going to be sleeping sitting up. If you lay down on it, you're going to be sleep. If you lay face down, you're going to go to sleep on it. You can't get enough air because you go to sleep so quickly. They should have a warning label on these Helix mattresses, no matter what kind of position. Let's say you get suplexed. Let's say you get press slammed. Let's say you get blue thunder bombed onto this bed. It doesn't matter what position you land on this mattress, you're going to go right to sleep because that's how comfortable those people at helixsleep.com make these mattresses, and they're killing my life. I can't get out of bed. Good heavens. And it's very detrimental. Let's say you want to do something else in bed. Let's say you want to eat in bed. Let's say you want to have a little nookie. You can't stay awake. So basically, that's why you need a Helix Sleep mattress in your home, in your bedroom or rec room or kitchen or wherever you do your sleeping. Do you sleep in the kitchen ever, Brian?
I don't hear. I used to in an old apartment of mine years ago.
Aunt Lola and Uncle Tommy used to when they lived on 13th Street up in Covington. They gave Grandpa John the nice bed, and they'd wheel the bed with wheels in it into the kitchen at night. But nevertheless, I digress because that's before they made the Helix Sleep mattresses. Aunt Lola and Uncle Tommy would both still be here if they've been able to sleep on a Helix Sleep mattress. Now, what makes these things so special, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. What they do is they make different kinds of mattresses for different kinds of people. They got mattresses for big and tall sleepers, a mattress made just for kids, a collection of luxury models, stuff that cools you down if you sleep hot. And the way you determine which mattress you'd like to have, all you got to do, go to Helix, that's Helix, helixsleep.com, and take their quiz. It takes about 2 minutes, just about the same length of time as a WWE professional wrestling match. And in that 2 minutes of time, then you will tell them whether you like to sleep on your side or on your back or on your head or with your nose stuck up somebody's ass, whatever the case may be, however you like to sleep. Then they're going to pick the model that is most responsive to you. And they will tell you which one you'll like, and you will order it. And if you don't like it, well, besides the fact that they've got the 10 or 15-year warranty, depending on the model, so this thing's covered. I mean, holy mackerel. Many of us won't be alive. The warranty will still be available on these mattresses, but also you get 100 nights risk-free. And if you don't like it in that point in time, then they will come to your house and they will actually set fire to it and get rid of it right in your bedroom.
No, they will not set fire to anything. They will not do that. They'll
take it out in the backyard and set fire to it.
They will take it away in their car or their truck or whatever. They have a van potentially.
A conveyance of some description.
And it will be gone and no questions asked.
Because you told me that they don't resell the ones that they confiscate from people, so I assume they just set fire to them and burned them so they wouldn't make that mistake.
I don't think
But they probably do that over at the plant, not right in your home.
They don't do that at the plant or anywhere else, and they certainly don't do anything like that. There will be no fires started at your home unless it's you who starts it.
Well, now they support military and first responders. That includes fire departments, so they've got one standing by. They also support teachers and students. They get a special discount, all of those people on the site. And they own their own manufacturing facility. So each and every Helix mattress made in the USA by a team of skilled craftsmen that have come from somewhere in the United States and have their papers. You should never have to compromise on comfort or on American-made mattresses. None of this stuff's going to come from Brazil. And they've got over 12,000 five-star reviews. And none of those came from Brazil either because they don't want to deal with Brazil. They're coming to fucking Des Moines and Cleveland. And right now, folks, all you got to do, what do you go? Wow, they've changed this. I'll tell you what you have to do and what they're going to do for you. They are no longer offering a set amount off all mattress orders. They are offering a percentage, a bigger piece of the pie. You're going to get a piece of the action, baby. Helix is offering up to 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners if you go to helixsleep.com/JCE. That's 20% off up to 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows at helixsleep.com/JCE. Their best offer yet. It won't last long. it's over. No, it's not. You can still get in right now if you hurry with Helix. Better sleep starts right now.
Well, wake up now. We don't have time for you to sleep right now. We still have more Raw to put you to sleep.
Oh, God. Well, wake up and take your sleeping pill. Here's Raw. Okay. At the 10 o'clock hour, remember I said they got to have the star power right at the top of the hour. Did you notice their 10 o'clock star power?
I forget who it was.
Yeah, exactly. The Miz in the ring with Miz TV. You need a telescope to see this star. And again, a talk show on the show filled with talk. And he introduces his guest, Seth Franklin Rollins. Now, remember, they were thick as thieves here not long ago, but now that Seth is a babyface for whatever reason, I think they just switch guys when they run out of ideas for him the other way. So Seth comes in and they're adversarial, him and Miz. And of course, by the time they start talking, because Seth has to lead the fans in the oh, or is it oh, whoa, oh, I can't get how many OEOs are there?
There are no OEOs, but it's something similar. And again, I've said it before, people like that kind of stuff. Wrestling fans like that stuff because when he comes out, he gets a good pop and they start singing along with the song, but they're silent when he's talking. They like the song. Wrestling fans like reacting to entrance music now more than ever before.
And he's got a song he's got to sing, and he's going to sing it. So they took a while.
You want to be a wrestling star? You just got to come out there and just get someone, just something like that over and over so people in the arena can do it with them.
Because Cody's got the and Seth has the oli,
Becky also has
Becky's got and then Generico had the ole. And then Nia Jackson got my hole. All right, well, and Miz even actually said, all right, let's get to the point. I only have 10 minutes here. And I'm like, Jesus. So now we know we got 10 minutes of this. And Seth Franklin Rollins was wearing inflatable red balloon boots. I don't know why.
It's a stupid thing that, I hate to put it this way, but it's the only way to put it. Among certain people is fashionable right now. And at least it's trendy and something people are talking about. Because the other day during a Nick game, the music producer Duplo, or Diplo.
Duplo?
What's his name? Diplo or Duplo?
I tell you, it's your story. And
I never listened to his shit, but either way, this idiot was sitting fucking courtside wearing those giant red boots. He looked ridiculous, and everyone started making fun of him.
Well, these two look pretty fucking ridiculous, and Seth had balloon boots on. And they argued for about 10 minutes. Miz's point was that Seth will never main event WrestleMania like he did. And Seth took exception to that and started taking off his dressing for pleasure outfit. Looked like he was on the board of directors of a massage parlor. And he punches Miz, and then suddenly Theory appears and pulls Seth out to the floor, and Seth beats him up. But then Miz waylaid Seth, and I swear to God, Seth super kicked Miz with the inflatable boots, and Miz sold it like he was knocked out. And then he gave him a curb stomp with balloons on his fucking feet. And he sold that. And it looks like a bunch of kids having a birthday party in a bouncy house at this point. And then Theory comes back in the ring and gives Seth his finish. And that's where I wrote, I don't want to see any more of this show.
Hey, Jim, I have an article here from the Wall Street Journal, February 13th, 2023. Jacob Gallagher, the author. By turning wearers into cartoons, these big red boots and their makers have the last laugh. They are taller than a 2-liter bottle of Coke, and the shade of an overripe tomato. Collectively, they weigh about as much as a newborn, a massive 3.5 pounds each. And they are easily the most attention-hogging thing I'd ever put on my size 11 feet. 3.5 pounds each. What do you think of that?
They seriously look like balloons. So, but again, 3 pounds is, what's that? 3 boxing gloves. If they use the 16-ounce fucking gloves.
What do you think of Rollins right now? Of Seth Fran Drescher Rollins?
I don't think of Seth. I don't know what any of this is. The weird voices and the cackling and the clothes and the back and forth. Is he a heel? Is he a baby face? Is he? I don't know what.
It's a guy trying really hard to be interesting, and he's not. And the sad thing is, I think if it was just simpler, everything would work better with him, because there are times he's acting like the usual jerk, and then all of a sudden something happens and it gets serious, and he has a great serious face.
Yeah.
But then he goes back to the silliness. I just don't think this does anything that people like singing to his music, but do they want to see him on that show otherwise? I don't know.
You can be a guy with a good physique and long hair and flashy clothes and a snappy dresser and cut a promo and not just go so fucking. It's like, what in the world is going on? They want everything over the top so far that it comes around the other side. Anyway. And now, by the way, they actually had, because I know he didn't go into business for himself and do this on his own, Miz gets curb stomped with the balloon boots and lays there in the break selling in the ring while they change the mat around him. And the whole night, and there was an interview in the back where Booger and Ezekiel were in the back giving each other backhanded compliments. Apparently now Ezekiel's a fucking heel. And then they come back, and the match is supposed to be Booger against The Miz. And I'm a fucking seriously, again, we ring the bell at 10:15 Eastern time, 2 hours and 15 minutes into the program. We've had 4 matches with 16 minutes of wrestling, and Miz is there saying, no way we're having a match right now. I've just been beaten up and assaulted. And then they ring the bell, and Booger gives him a suplex, picks him up like a barbell and curls him 10 times, presses him, slams him, and beats him 1, 2, 3 in less than a minute. And I'm not arguing with The Miz doing a job. I think he should do a bunch of them on the way out. But again, let's get this match out of the way. We're stuck where we got to get to a new entrance. Get the match out of the way.
I was kind of done with the show by this point. I kept watching.
Yeah.
But I was tired. Nothing was happening. The stars were already gone other than the main event. You weren't going to see Cody again. I was done.
Well, and speaking of being done, the main event on this program, the triple threat match that was made so many hours ago, Bianca versus Becky versus Bayley. The entrances started at 10:34. They went to break at 10:37, and they come back at 10:40. The match has already started. A 3-hour show, and one match is going to be longer than 3 minutes, and it's the fucking girls' match. No wonder nobody watches wrestling to see a fight anymore. They don't have any. It's a fucking rib. So now, basically that was, and I don't remember or care who won this thing, because I've watched 3 hours to see anything remotely fucking exciting or money drawing besides the one promo, and they get to the main event match when they haven't had a real match on the whole show, and it's fucking girls in a fucking triple threat. Yeah.
Who's that?
Hey, I don't know. I'll see here in a second. I don't know. I don't know who it is, and I'm afraid to answer it and just cuss them blindly, because it might be somebody that might be paying me money soon. Anyway, that was Raw.
That was Raw.
Boy, was it. Raw rolls on.
Well, Jim, that was indeed Raw, but let's talk about some other news in and around the World Wrestling Federation, as it was once called. This email sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Scott in Florida. I came across a quote from a recent Cody Rhodes interview. I'm attaching the quote, and here it is. If I'm Roman Reigns, I'm not necessarily scared of Brandy Rhodes. If I'm Mr. Heyman, I would be scared of what could happen. She's really enjoying watching this. My whole family, not that they've come out of the woodwork, they've always been big supporters, but for Mania, because I've never been in this situation before, I've gotten everything really organized in advance. So going back to this question in the email, should Brandy come out and joust with Heyman just like the good old days?
I think she's got to come out and tackle him. I don't want to see a verbal, because Brandy's face-to-face or confrontation or whatever with Jane Cargill was classic because it was so bad. I don't think we need anything at WrestleMania that approaches that. And Heyman, for his part, could verbally demolish Brandy. But I think if Brandy comes out and just fucking tackles Heyman and starts wailing on his bald head, that would probably blow the roof off the stadium. That's what I think.
If you're going to use Brandy, do you use her at Mania or do you use her in one of the things building up to Mania?
Well, then the building up to Mania, I'm afraid the tendency or the inclination might be to try to use her to get some kind of heat. And I think it would backfire. The people would cheer if Roman Reigns laid her out. But if she got on Heyman and we had a good old-fashioned wife-manager catfight, I think that would be entertaining as shit. Otherwise, maybe she should just stay in the back with Pharaoh and keep an eye on the leash.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Andrew M. Big fan and longtime listener. Wanted to get your take on Jey Uso, a.k.a. the unsung hero of the Bloodline. I feel like ever since Jey had his initial program with Reigns in 2020, he has consistently improved and also proved how good he could be as a singles superstar. Furthermore, I also believe Jimmy has all the tools to become a successful singles star as well, if given the opportunity to show it. I feel the summation of this Bloodline odyssey should ultimately give way to an Uso split, resulting in both guys becoming solo acts. What's your take on the Usos becoming singles competitors at some point this year? Would you think it could be a successful direction for WWE to go in with these two competitors?
Well, and by the way, was that his English major thesis, constructing that question, this guy with all the big words? We talked about this when we were talking about directions they could go with the Bloodline. Yeah, you can split tag team partners up and then they can be singles and go, but when you've got guys that are pretty much twins, I mean, they're twins and one has some coloring in his hair to differentiate from the other one. That's tough, because then, and especially the similar names, you're creating, I can see Vince McMahon, confusion in the marketplace, pal. That's real hard when you've got two twin brothers, similar names. You're trying to make them singles, especially if one might be a heel, one might be a babyface in the same place. It's difficult because a lot of these guys don't stand out as it is.
But you could see what he's saying about Jey Uso specifically and his performance, again, since that program with Roman. Not to put Jimmy down, but Jey kind of has been the standout performer.
Yeah, and I think, that's what I'm saying basically is it's hard to have two guys that look that's the same, have similar names, etc. If that happens, then one of the Usos would probably be the, what do they call it these days, the Marty Jannetty of the team. And so it wouldn't be good for one of them, even if it was good for the other one. So I'm not saying that one or the other couldn't be a single. I'm saying that both of them probably can't be in the same fucking place. So then if you like the Usos and you want to see them be singles, then you're about to lose one of the Usos.
If Roman loses the belt at Mania, the belts at Mania, if Roman loses whatever he has at Mania, and he's no longer champion, Can you see the bloodline existing without Roman?
Well, then you've got Jay, Jimmy, and Solo. Paul E is not going to be a constant or even a habitual presence without Roman involved, because that's where the money is. So without Roman, then it's going to be hard. Then you've got a tag team and you got the Samoan enforcer, but there's no, as Flair would say, there's no straw that stirs the drink. So that would be tough too, to have a bloodline group, unless another big, and who would that be? Another big name came in that was part of the bloodline.
If you can get around matches and Roman doesn't wrestle that often, and he doesn't even appear on every SmackDown at this point, I couldn't do it. I was going to say, what about The Rock? But that would make him a heel. That's the only reason I don't think he could do it, is it would make him a heel, probably.
Well, plus they can't pin him down to just show up for the biggest show of the year.
Although they just announced his movie's taking a 6-week break. Which is interesting timing.
Could it be Vince cashed in some more stock? Hey, Rock, here's an extra $1 million.
At what point do you stop doing that if you've already sold out Mania?
You can never sell out Mania now, though. That's the thing. On Peacock, you can't ever sell it out. You can't. The pay-per-view is sold out. You can't order the pay-per-view now. No more are available. Peacock, the free telecast, it's blacked out now. You can't ever sell it out anymore. So if they get The Rock, then they get an extra how many 100,000 people watching on Peacock, and they look like geniuses to, one of the major corporations that they're trying to get to fucking buy them.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com is from Dave Sosiska. Dave Sasidka. Dave Sasidka in Epping, New Hampshire.
In Epping, New Hampshire? What the hell did New Hampshire ever do to you? You got that fucking New Hampshire.
Not effing, Epping.
Oh, never mind.
Let's go to Dave's question. I know both of you are historians and collectors. As a young fan in the 1970s in the WWF territory, I remember being disappointed at the poor selection and quality of souvenirs available at the local wrestling shows. If some visionary, before Vince, had come along, could promoters' fortunes have turned based on having better merchandise to sell fans, at least partially?
Is that it?
That was it.
Okay, I think the question can be boiled down to, if they had better merchandise in those days, would they have made more money? And yes, obviously the answer is yes. Some places did. I mean, there was always an arena program. We mentioned Jerry Jarrett earlier. His first job when he was 8 years old or whatever was selling slamagram programs for 5 cents a piece back then. But in 1950, if you sold 1,000 of those, that was $50, and $50 in 1950 is what, $600 or $700 today. There were always programs, and the office could keep all the profit above the cost of printing. And yes, there was merchandising of individual wrestlers, especially the first, round of TV network in the 50s. There was the Vern Gagne wrestling game and all that other stuff. But the territories really didn't get into merchandising the guys, because the guys would bitch and they'd want to cut, and they didn't want to go through all that shit, and they didn't see the value in it. And then later on, as the business got hot in the 80s, I mean, Tennessee with me was again early on selling major multiples of pictures of all the talent and T-shirts and frisbees. And Lawler had some guy in Memphis that did merchandise for him. There were Jerry Lawler drinking cups and Jimmy Valiant frisbees and all this shit, right? And none of it was expensive because people weren't going to spend. There were no replica belts. There were no big ticket items. The fans weren't going to spend that kind of money back then. But everybody, when you had 5,000 people coming to a building every week, and they were going to spend a couple dollars on a picture at a program, then that would add up over the course of the year, as we've talked about before. But I think part of it is the promoters didn't want to figure a lot of the guys in on cuts, on merchandise specifically featuring them, unless they were just the biggest guy in the territory. Vern would do some stuff with the Crusher, whatever.
Vern was fighting with Hogan over merch stuff, remember?
Yeah, because he didn't want to, they didn't want to turn loose of, a lot of times the promoters would just sell shit of the guys and not give them any money, and the guys would bitch. Other times they didn't want to because they didn't want to cut them in, so they kept it to just their promotion, their program, and, a T-shirt of, hey, All-Star Wrestling or whatever. But
I have all the records, all the financial records, all the correspondence, everything for all the deals Norm Keitzer did with various guys, from the Destroyer to Mad Dog Vachon to the Crusher, various other people.
And see, those guys were taking matters in their own hands and selling their own shit, putting an ad in the wrestling magazines, so they didn't have to go through the promoter at the live events. But that's the way it was. They definitely all could have made more money, as those of us who tried found out when I started the Championship Wrestling magazine. They were, I think, $3 a piece, and the fans would pay it because they got all kinds of pictures of their favorite wrestlers and got to read about them. And they had something they could get autographed. And then, obviously, since then, it's blown up into a multi-million-dollar business, merchandising, with everything from belts to ring-worn stuff to replicas of all kinds of shit. But in the old day, I loved the paper shit. I just loved the documentation of, here was the card, here's news on what was happening, the arena program, and the old magazines. But there's somebody that collects everything these days. But yeah, a lot more money could have been made back then if they'd bothered to, but they didn't. They didn't expand that way.
I'm always blown away that no one tried to do anything action figure-wise, even cheaply, very, very cheaply, before the LJNs took off here in the States. I'm not counting Japan, obviously.
Again, the toy companies didn't have pro wrestling on their radar, and the wrestling promoters didn't have toy companies on their radar, and they really didn't think about it. And then the question, because of the transitory nature also, I'll say this and then we can move on, because it's your show. But the time that it takes, and we know the lead time in getting action figures made and developing and stuff and everything, no wrestlers were under contract. And if you, as a promoter, spend any time and effort in talking to a toy company and setting up a deal like that, unless it was a deal like it was, Watts in McGurk's territory or Lawler and Jarrett's territory, or one of the top guys that were in the office or owned a piece of the thing wasn't going anywhere, you might set all that stuff up, and by the time the figures are ready to be released, the guy's been gone from your territory for 6 months. And then what the fuck? Who gives a shit? Nobody's going to buy them, out of sight, out of mind. They got new talent. It just didn't work when guys weren't under exclusive contract for long periods of time and merchandising systems already in place, and etc.
It's amazing to think about what wrestling could have been financially if any of the mechanisms that are there today in terms of shirts or figures or anything were there back then. Everyone wants to say, look at how much money they're making now. You can't even compare them to some of the people of the past. We don't know what a lot of those people would have made.
Well, again, in 1986, the Rock and Roll Express fan club, what was it to join? Was it $10 or was it $12? You got the 45 record, you got the fucking life-size poster and a newsletter, and they did $2 million on that in a short period of time.
Now imagine if the Rock and Roll Express came around in the last few years. They would be able to have a new shirt, as much as they want, but let's say a new shirt every month.
Yeah.
They'd be able to have action figures that they could sell at a nice markup and then sign. They'd be able to do it all themselves. They had none of that. Think of how much money, if you actually just start thinking about how many people join that fan club and give a percentage of that audience would buy an action figure of Ricky and Robert, or buy a shirt, maybe 2 shirts if they're once a month. Who knows? Think about how much money they could have made.
Well, besides the cameos Can you imagine?
Wow, yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
the girls between the ages of 13 and 25, just in the states of North and South Carolina, that would have asked for their birthday, for Christmas, just let Ricky and Robert speak my name on video and blow me a kiss. I'll pay any price. I'll do it. If these girls would do anything, and I mean anything, already just to get Ricky and Robert to wave at them. So, I mean, nobody in wrestling today is as popular as the Rock and Roll Express were in the Carolinas in 1986. That's a pretty foregone fucking conclusion. So the money they could have made if they could have reached all those people was insane.
Well, Jim, it would probably be a pretty depressing thought for Ricky or Robert to think about the money they could have made, or maybe even the money they did make and just weren't paid.
Oh, they can't dwell on it. They can't dwell on it. It would be very anxiety producing.
I think so. And if that was the case, they would probably need someone to talk to.
Well, and folks, if you feel like that you've been screwed out of a couple $1 million on your fan club, or if you came along too early to get cameo video messages out to all the girls that are lusting after you, and it's still giving you anxiety, or any other reason that you need to talk to somebody, well, then go to our old friends at BetterHelp, because after all, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, along with many of them here in our archives, because consistently we've had feedback from the Cult of Cornette members that therapy, and specifically trying BetterHelp, help them solve problems, get over issues, or become a better person when life gets you bogged down and you feel overwhelmed and you're not out there pumping the way you need to be. Sometimes you just need to run something by someone else, get another viewpoint or someone else's opinion on things. And that's what the folks at BetterHelp do with licensed therapists. They are I'm trying to figure out the exact verbiage, the world's largest at this type of thing, certainly the most well thought of. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, entirely online. You fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time, no additional charge. And you can do it on your schedule, in your own time, in your own way, but you can make the effort to make some changes in your life if you want to live a more empowered life. That's what Laurinaitis told me one time we ought to do to the wrestlers. We ought to empower them instead of yell at them. I said, how about just some way or another making them figure their shit out however we do it? However you want to do it, BetterHelp will help you do it. So all you got to do is go to BetterHelp. That's HELP, BetterHelp.com/JCE, and you're going to get 10% off your first month's services. BetterHelp.com/JCE for 10% off your first month's services. When you need somebody to talk to, because we're just talking at you. You can talk back to us, but we can't hear you. Well, the people at BetterHelp can hear you, except for that one deaf therapist they got named Sam. He can't hear it.
There's no deaf therapist named Sam. Let's not joke about this. They have fine therapists that you should check out today. If you need someone to talk to, there's BetterHelp.
I thought he was trying to communicate with me in sign language. You're telling me he was just telling me what he thought of me?
I guess so. I guess so. How are we supposed to end it? BetterHelp.
BetterHelp.com/JCE. If you need help, like Brian, BetterHelp.
I certainly do right now, but Jim.
Yes.
There are some other people in wrestling that may need some help. We've received several emails about several comments that were made over the past week in wrestling. One that a lot of people have sent in. Let me go to the email here. One of them sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Gene. Hi. I was wondering what Jim's thoughts were on Conan's recent comments on Takeshita doing the Eddie Guerrero frog splash. Do you remember this from the match?
Yes. They were in El Paso. He goes up, he does the wiggle and does the frog splash off the top on MJF. Got a big pop.
Big pop.
Big pop.
Apparently Conan on his podcast commented, here's a quote. Well, Takeshita, whatever, he's got heat with me, and he's lucky I wasn't in El Paso. Because when he went up and he did the Eddie Guerrero thing for the frog splash, you're not Mexican, dude. I don't care. Stick to your nationality.
Stick to your nationality.
This got people up in arms. Konnan even trended for the first time maybe ever over this. What are your thoughts on this comment and the idea that only... Konnan's not Mexican, by the way. He's a Cuban American, I believe. That only Mexican wrestlers can pay tribute to Eddie Guerrero.
Well, I mean, Konnan was friends with Eddie, and, I guess Hispanic, you can be Mexican or you can be Cuban or whatever. You're all in the Hispanic family. I guess I can see where he might be, hey, because it was my friend, it was Eddie, and you're doing his shit. But at the same time, I don't think it was malicious. It wasn't like the guy was going to steal it, because I'm sure somebody told him to do that. Because they're in El Paso, the home of the Guerreros, and the guy does a frog splash, so let's give an homage to Eddie Guerrero and do the Eddie that people liked it, because they like thinking about Eddie Guerrero.
Didn't Logan Paul just do it? Logan Paul just did it.
I saw him do a frog splash. I can't remember whether he did the little dippy-doo beforehand. Well, that... If I was Konnan, I'd be more pissed off at that, because I'm pretty sure Logan Paul never met Eddie Guerrero and is just doing something to get a pop. But with this kid, old take a shit, in Eddie's hometown, the Guerrero's hometown, he's a baby face. People like him. He's doing a tribute or an homage with all respect. I don't know if I'd pick that to be upset about, but because Konnan's friends with Eddie, I can see why he might have been, hey, stay in your lane. But I don't think it's a bigger deal. I don't think it's a big deal either way, to be honest with you.
It's not too much of a big deal. I mean, it's a stupid comment, and again, people jumped on it. Miro had a comment about it. Did you see that?
I did not. Now, what would Miro have to say about these things?
Miro, last seen as a professional wrestler months and months and months ago, maybe a year ago at this point. I don't even know the last time we saw him. When was the last time we saw Miro?
I don't know. Over at the Kroger in line at the U-Scan? I don't know.
Well, he's still starring on Twitter, where he said, quote, "I bet you all that Konnan, or whatever his name is, can't last 10 seconds with Takeshita."
What, right now? Right this second, yeah, with old Take is 20-something years old and Konnan's 60 and awaiting another kidney transplant or something. I have a feeling he could probably take Konnan right now. Does that necessarily prove anything there? Is Miro friends with Take? What's going on here? Is he just doesn't like Konnan?
Has Miro even met Take?
Has he even met him? Yeah, Take's only been working there a few months. Miro hadn't showed up in a fucking year. So maybe there's heat from when Konnan was there last time, and Miro just don't like Konnan.
Well, we will see how this turns out, but
I think they're all looking for reasons to fucking gripe at each other, because it's the AEW locker room. What the fuck? And or associated environs.
Well, Jim, speaking of the AEW locker room, Cody Rhodes this past week, or was it last week, was on Ariel Helwani's show. I believe the MMA Hour is the name of the show. And he commented on his thoughts about the CM Punk fight with the Elite at All Out. Did you see any of this or hear any of this?
I didn't hear it. I saw a quote on Twitter, and that's about all the depth I got into it. I knew you were going to be asking me about it.
Well, I have some audio here. Let's play this. Again, this is from the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. We're going to review Cody Rhodes on there. Hopefully the audio plays all right. Let's try it now.
Gosh, even if you remember when he came back, everyone was fired up about that. Everybody. So when I watched...
Let me stop for a second. He's talking about CM Punk coming back.
Yes.
Watched it, just from my sitting there, I was not... There were some people texting me. I remember somebody texting me, "Man, you're the smartest guy in the room." And I wanted to write back, F you, man. I don't feel that way. I feel this thing we built got damaged. And I'm not putting any blame on anybody. Sorry, I'm super Switzerland in this moment.
No, I get it.
I'm not putting any blame on anybody, but I just hated seeing that.
Let me stop for a second. There's no blame to be placed on anybody?
Super Switzerland. Well, I mean, it's
Super Switzerland.
It's not his place now to come in and say, because people were saying you're the smartest guy in the room. The implication was they were saying you got out of there before the shit started fucking hitting the wall. But I can understand him not being happy that the whole company was in chaos and that they had basically, his former co-EVPs had run off their biggest money-drawing star. I can understand why he wouldn't be happy to hear that, even if he had already left. And why should he place blame to anybody? Because why should he get in the middle of it and then have a bunch of people texting him, whichever side it was? He doesn't have a dog in that fight anymore. He's overdoing his own thing for the big boys.
Well, let's go back to Cody.
Because as the company grows, and I hope it continues to grow, I hope people remember the mission in the first place, why we were there. And if you bring in people who don't know the mission, then things like that can happen. And I'm not saying he didn't know the mission or anything of that nature, but I was just bummed
Well, yeah, I think he just did.
Yeah, if you don't know the mission, this is what can happen. I'm not saying he didn't know the mission. However, this is what happened. So you are saying he didn't know the mission. What is the mission, Jim? I thought the mission was Tony Khan's got a lot of money and he's always wanted a wrestling company.
That was pretty much the mission from Tony's. The other guys thought they were going to change the world. And Cody, I think with every good intention, thought they were going to change the world in the wrestling business. And unfortunately, he didn't realize that he was also going into business with children. He was going to soon become older and tireder.
Yeah, and again, Cody has been very diplomatic. A lot of it's contractual with an NDA, but he's been very diplomatic about everything there. He won't even admit that there were ever problems with him and the Bucks and Omega. I mean, that's how far it's gotten, but let's go back to this audio.
Well, there is every once in a while the comment that, everybody had their own view of wrestling, and hey, that's fine. I wanted to do this and somebody else wanted to do that. It's obvious who wanted to do what.
That's how I felt. I was bummed out because you win a title, it's a feather in your cap. You win the Royal Rumble, it's a feather in your cap. Building an alternative wrestling promotion is definitely a feather in the cap. I don't want that to be erased. I don't want that to go away. Plus, there's not as many jobs in wrestling as people think. There's about 1,000 people who work there, structurally, infrastructure, and talent. I'm proud of them, and I want to make sure they're able to feed their families. And that was a situation that was so big and heavy. I don't think it was helpful. Right. And I don't know, maybe you can make it helpful. Maybe you can do something with it. But it was just, that's how I felt. No heat on Punk, no heat on Matt, Nick, Kinney, or Tony. I was just bummed out when I saw it. That's not how we envisioned it. If you were at All In, were you at All In?
No.
All right. The spirit of All In. If you ever lose the spirit, you're lost.
Right.
And I think the spirit was gone in that moment. Doesn't mean you can't get it back. But it was just a bummer. I also felt weird because I always talk to everybody. So I was like, I don't want to make it look like I'm taking any sides here. Right. I'm literally just an observer now. I'm not there, guys. No connections, other than the initial connection. So just a bummer.
All right, Jim, what are your thoughts on Cody there?
Well, it's a bummer. It's a bummer, man. I mean, again, what else can he say? He can, break any NDAs, as you mentioned, and he can piss off a bunch of people that are going to be texting him and whining about it and everything, or he can just be diplomatic and move on with his day. And I think that's what he's doing there. He doesn't have to worry about it anymore, and he's probably is disappointed to see it from his old cohorts, but that probably also reinforces in his mind that he made the right decision.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. From Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
Here we go. The Charlie alert.
Liv Morgan said she wants to pursue an acting career.
Good.
What are your thoughts on Morgan wanting to be an actress? And
I'm for it.
And what do you think about female wrestlers that want to use wrestling as a springboard to an acting career?
I think it should work for all of them as quickly as possible. Get the fuck on out of here. I didn't know she said that because I don't listen to what Liv Morgan has to say, but it's obvious. You mean to tell me any of these girls, I'm going to say, I believe that Rhea Ripley probably would have because she's so natural, she gets it. But you mean to tell me that almost any of these other girls right now in the WWE would have got in the wrestling business if it was still the wrestling business and they just wanted to be in it. And it wasn't that they're going to instantly make hundreds of thousands of dollars and get on OnlyFans like Mandy Rose and make millions and be on TV and marry other semi-celebrities and be on reality shows and blah, blah, blah. No. They think it's a big fight. They get to travel the world and be in show business on TV. That's why none of the fucking female wrestlers look like they goddamn know what the fuck they're doing. Because they've come into an entertainment company. It's like hiring on with the Harlem Globetrotters or whatever. And then they think they'll graduate to television and OnlyFans and motion pictures and sitcoms. And like I said, I'd like to think that Rhea Ripley is not like that because she gets it. And Natalya, of course, she's there because of family and genealogy. And Becky Lynch, she was doing it before she, got a contract and went to the Performance Center. But was Liv Morgan ever an indie wrestler?
I don't know. I don't want to say anything one way or the other because I don't know.
So that's, so you think about what I would think about it is that, yeah. And some of the guys are that way too now. So I don't think anything more of them. If you just get in the wrestling business because you want to be a TV star, fuck you. Take up somebody else's fucking time and effort trying to teach you to do something if you're not serious about it.
The amount of wrestlers that are constantly hanging out in or around Los Angeles because they think it's going to open up some kind of acting door is kind of astounding. It's been happening for a long time, too.
I didn't even realize that, but if they are, well, that's just fucking sad.
Well, Jim, if they are,
and it's just hard for me to stomach.
If they're hard for you to stomach, maybe you need something to be done to your stomach. Maybe you could do something to your own stomach to improve the situation. Maybe you and your stomach are the problem, and we can't do anything by you, but we can help your stomach.
Folks, I'll tell you what. I just mentioned last week that I had the colonoscopy. Just as, again, one of these preventative type of things, but you never know what they're going to find up there. And now they've told me I need more fiber. I got to take care of my gut health. That's what I got to do. And folks, I'll tell you what, I'm reading up. A lot of information has been put in front of me on your gut and gut health and habits related to your gut and probiotics and gastrointestinal things and things that you digest and ways you digest. And if I only had time to read you these lengthy pieces that I've been reading on how to take care of your insides, it's amazing. Some of these words I've never even heard before. But nevertheless, to boil everything down into something that's manageable, that you can understand, that you can hang your hat on. We got friends of the program here, our friends at Seed. And Seed are responsible for producing one of the finest probiotics that all of modern medicine has ever produced. And, probiotics have been studied to support a range of benefits within the gastrointestinal system, the reinforcement of gut barrier function, the support of crosstalk between your gut and your immune cells. And everybody knows that if you have words coming from your stomach that you can hear, that means that your gut and your immune cells are talking to each other. And it's not idle chatter. It's stuff that they each need to know about how to make you healthy. And I've also heard that there are 3 ways to support your gut immune axis. You got to increase your daily fiber intake. Did you know that certain fibers are fermented by gut microbes and biotransformed into short-chain fatty acids, which help maintain immune health? Brian, did you realize that?
Oh, no, I didn't know.
And also, you got to prioritize the sleep. You got your circadian rhythm. That means you've eaten a bunch of cicadas. And it plays a key role in maintaining the homeostasis of the microbiome. And the gut microbiome has its own circadian clock.
Wow!
You got to manage the stress. because the inflammation that often accompanies higher levels of stress can trigger blooms of pathogenic microbes that promote dysbiosis and increase intestinal permeability, which is also known as a leaky gut. And that's the last thing I want to be doing is dripping all over my new carpet in my freshly remodeled room because my gut's leaking. And where would it leak? Potentially, I guess, out the ass. That might be the most attractive place for the leaking to occur. So the point is, folks, here's what we need to do. Well, I'm just telling you, here's what we need to do. We need to take care of our gut. And we need to go to the folks at Seed, at seed.com, SEED.com, because they are right now producing Seed's DS01 Daily Synbiotic. And that is something that's going to help you with all of this stuff. If I only had time, again, you're going to be maintaining your blood cholesterol levels. You're going to be supporting healthy intestinal recycling of cholesterol and bile. And I'll tell you what, we recycle a bunch of bile on this program every week, but we still need some helpful hints from the folks at Seed. And not to mention the gut barrier integrity, gut immune function, micronutrient synthesis. They'll be more than happy to talk to you about all these things. The point is, folks, you got to take care of your stomach. For heaven's sake, you won't be able to just chow down on a big old triple cheeseburger if you don't take care of your stomach. So you got to do these things. And right now, if you go to seed.com/drive and use the code DRIVE, you'll get 20% off your first month of Seed's DS01 Daily Synbiotic. That's seed.com/drive. Avoid gut mania. Head to the trusted source for Synbiotics. Start a new healthy habit today. Get the real deal in a Synbiotic that's backed by clinical trials and scientific data. They have looked at this shit from one end to the other, and they have determined that this is the stuff you need to do for a wonderful gut health journey. Seed.com/drive. Use the code DRIVE. You're going to get 20% off your first month of this daily Synbiotic. You'll have a symbiosis with your Synbiotic.
That's right. Try
That's Seed.
Seed. That's right.
That's what people told me. My mother warned me years ago that if I didn't change my ways, I would go to Seed. And son of a gun, I've ended up right there at Seed, and they're helping me stay healthy.
There you go. Mama Cornette approved, as Mama Cornette always used to say. It's like gum on a big boot heel.
That's what she never said in her life.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's get going with a few more questions here. Jim, let me get this next one in. Jim, this was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Michael. I've always wondered, how dirty, disgusting does the ring get towards the end of the night? Do they wash it thoroughly each night?
Yep.
Or before each match? Has Jim had any memorable, gross experiences with this?
Oh.
I noticed at the Royal Rumble, Alexa Bliss was laying right where Otis had rolled all sweaty earlier in the night, and Rhea Ripley put the ring rope in her mouth. Is this all as gross as it all sounds, or does the ring naturally soak up goo and they quickly wash it thoroughly throughout the night? How do they clean up lots of blood? The ring always looks clean on TV.
Oh boy, where do we start? Well, first of all, this is something that Vince was doing back to the Attitude Era when they started making some money and TV became more important. Vince, and I'd never seen any promoter ever, and even WCW under Turner Broadcasting, etc. I'd never seen any promoter do this. Vince McMahon would crack out a brand new canvas for every episode of Monday Night Raw.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And so they ended up, as a matter of fact, when I came down here to OVW, I brought 3 or 4 canvases with me because they had so fucking many, and he wouldn't use on television a used canvas. So
How much did those cost?
Fuck, back there 20-something years ago, a good one, $1,000, $1,200. It's, 25 square feet of high-grade canvas with grommets and everything put in, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that's what he got mad when they had a stained mat one time and there was a piece of duct tape covering up a small rip in the corner. He said, new canvas for Raw every night now. But if you're talking about now, I would eat dinner off of the WWF canvases, whether they'd had a match go on in them or not. Those are the cleanest fucking rings because they've got a budget. It's high def TV now. Everything's lit up. They want it all to look nice. If you talk about the old days in the wrestling business, did they wash the canvas every night? Did they ever wash the canvas? I'm serious. Except if they did an angle where somebody got tarred and feathered and they got molasses on the canvas, or a paint angle, or the thing just got so many holes in it that duct tape wouldn't fucking solve it anymore and they'd get rid of it entirely, they would never clean it at all. Because you have to get a carpet steamer or something like that and take it outside where it can dry, or in a big warehouse. And you got to and most promoters didn't take the time or the trouble. I guarantee you, I saw the same canvas in the matches in Louisville sometimes for a year, 2 years in a row. And I don't know that it was ever cleaned. Spot show rings with the canvas that they had that would be rolled up and put on the back of an open trailer and carried down the fucking interstate to the next time after time after time. The canvas on the ring in the Dallas Sportatorium had been on there so long that it smelled like mildew from 10 feet away. And every time, I've told this story, every time you'd slap on the mat, if you had hay fever, Jesus Christ, you'd start coughing and sneezing.
How were there not more staph infections? Or is it just that we didn't hear all about them?
You didn't hear about them. Guys, I got a zit. I take some antibiotics or fucking heat up a fucking piece of that white wrist tape and fucking stick it on there. It'll bring it up to a head, stick it with a pin, whatever the fuck, going about your way. Yeah, no, I mean, we took care of our canvas as much as we could in Smoky Mountain, and I changed them every so often. And in OVW, we did the same thing because we got a few free canvases from the WWF, and we had room where we could put it out in the building in the Davis Arena and run the fucking steamer over it every so often. But no, in the territory days, especially spot show rings or a town, but even Memphis. I remember seeing the same goddamn. Finally, I think they changed it one time after one of those Lawler Funk bloodbaths when it was a white canvas and you couldn't hardly see it white anymore. But no, it was months and months before those things were ever touched. And then if somebody did have a staph infection outbreak or something, and somebody would say something, they'd just throw it away. We got another one somewhere in the trailer. And it would be a dirty one too, but it wouldn't be with the guy that just had staph, wouldn't have been on it recently. No, they stunk. You had every kind of goddamn, shit. And especially then outdoor shows in the summertime, spot show ring, with the guys bumping in and out of the ring in a fucking fairgrounds field, mud, dirt, dog shit, blood, sweat, whatever the case.
I can't get past the fact that Vince McMahon, if you're counting TV and pay-per-view, not knowing how many there were that year, you're looking at least 60, 65 canvases, brand new every year. Who manufactures them? Where do you get them?
You go, Omar the tent maker. No, honestly, that's what a lot of time you'd go to a tent and awning place or anybody that deals with canvas, banners, things like that, whoever, people just, that's who makes canvases. They don't care what you're going to use it for. But no, there was not a lot of cleanliness was not next to godliness on the rings in the wrestling business. And I mean, that always bugged me too. I hate it when the ring post looked like shit and hadn't been painted in 5 years, or there was no apron skirt you could see under the ring and it looked like shit.
That was the first thing I saw with Memphis stuff that kind of took me a little bit out of it when I was a kid, before I had really experienced it, was how come there's no, I didn't even know it was called a skirt. How come there's nothing on the apron?
Didn't have apron skirts. Well, here's the thing. In those days, each arena, because they were there every week, each arena stored its own ring. The same ring in the Louisville Gardens was used every week. Same ring in Memphis was used every week. Same ring in Evansville. And Lexington was only once a month, so Buddy Wayne or Ken would bring that on his trailer. And you had building employees putting the thing up, and it was just extra. It was extra expense, extra time. Some places had skirts, some places didn't. A lot of in Memphis, what they did was they started getting the goddamn canvas like 4 or 5 feet too big, and they just tied it down to the bottom, and the canvas was also an apron skirt. And then sometimes it barely go over the edges of the fucking ring. And you could see all the way under. You could see the fucking padding. It just it depended. This was low budget shit. They never spent any money, none of the territories, that they didn't have to.
Jim, another question that a lot of listeners, especially in the last week, have been sending in questions about, because Dave Meltzer, I believe, said something on one of his shows and various things going around. There is now a growing consideration amongst fans that CM Punk may return to AEW at some point in the next several months. What do you think of this, and what do you think it would mean?
Well, they need him. I think everybody's pretty much acknowledged that fact now. There is no the guy in that company. There's a guy wearing the belt, MJF, who is the only needle mover that they've had for ratings or really the big matches besides Punk. There's other guys, but nobody knows whether Moxley is a heel or a babyface or what his deal is. Bryan Danielson has not been assertive enough with his talent to where he's viewed as the unapproached top guy in the company. Nobody gives a shit about the EVPs anymore because the bloom is off that rose. They've seen all they have to offer over and over again. Now the viewers tune out except for the bedrock faithful. So they need a star. And they're still paying him. See, that's what a lot of people, they have to still be paying him. Tony's, he's under contract. So he's either getting paid or he's been fired.
And he's injured, so I don't think he's been fired.
And he's injured, so he ain't been, we'd have heard about it anyway if they'd have fired him. If they'd have come to some exit agreement, we would have heard about it. So he's still under contract, and that means he's still getting paid. And the injury that he had September, October, November, December, January, February, he's pretty good any time now. So they're either going to have to, through their lawyers, through their whatever their mediation process is, he's going to have to either get bought out, paid off, and released, or he's going to continue to get paid, in which case, then, if he's healthy and getting paid, then is he going to come back to work? And that's the question they got to answer. And if he does come back to work, I would have to think for a guy like Punk, who is, as we've mentioned, it's been phrased, doesn't take being disrespected very lightly. He doesn't have to come back and wrestle Twinkle Toes or the Buckaroos, and he wasn't before. He's never been in the ring with them, and he probably wasn't ever going to be, because he doesn't do that shit. And he wasn't there for that. But he has to coexist in the buildings with them, and I don't believe that he's going to come back, or that he would come back and continue to do what he did for the company, which was TV ratings and $1 million pay-per-view gates and etc. Unless Tony sits down with his EVPs and says, hey, you guys need to go mend some fences. There needs to be some kind of apology, settlement, agreement to move forward amongst you guys, because we need this guy. I'm paying him. I've got to, he's either going to come back to work and do business for me, or I'm going to have to release him, and then he's going to be able to go and do even bigger business for my competitor.
And you guys don't have the leverage right now to say that I should do something that's going to hurt my business.
Yes, and Harpo's contract is almost up. The Buckaroos, they got one last year on the thing that Tony, the clause that Tony exercised, but they're going to be out of there, or they're going to be renegotiating again. And what do they have to renegotiate on?
They've gotten everything. They've gotten their families' jobs, their friends' jobs. They've gotten to do all their little jerk-off segments, exist in their own. They have their own Codyverse, exist in their own little Codyverse.
Their own belts.
They've gotten everything they ever wanted from Tony, and it seems like it's not enough.
But now what do they have to negotiate on? They tank the ratings every time they're featured. Twinkle Toes was gone for an extended period of time and business didn't suffer, got better in certain instances. The Buckaroos, is anybody clamoring to see them now that we know that they're never going to have the rubber match with FTR and it'd be meaningless at this point if they did? Who do they want to see the Bucks wrestle now? Anybody? It was always, I want to see Bucks FTR. What do they want to see now? They saw 7 times in a row against Felix and Penthouse. Who else is there? So I think Tony needs to sit down his EVPs and say, Punk's healthy. I'm paying him a ton of money. He's the only one that has consistently produced big numbers for me, and the ratings and the gates that he's drawn on top blow away the shit that you guys have done. And you started this fucking whole deal and put me in this position. So I think y'all ought to line up with your tail between your legs and go and say, I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks, for the problems that we've had in the past. We'll stay out of your way going forward. We'd ask if we could help you, but we know we're incapable of that, and you wouldn't take it because it would be a hindrance. So we'll just stay out of your way and we apologize. Then maybe he gets Punk back. What else is there? Who else is he going to sign right now that's going to do what for the numbers what Punk did? It's going to do for the quality of the in-ring what Punk did. There's nobody else out there now that he can get because Vince has already snapped him up because he wants to sell his white elephant.
In terms of Punk, if he did come back, there's a natural thing there to be done with him and MJF.
Yes.
But looking beyond that, and that may be the initial thing they just go right back to, and I'm sure they can get months and months of great TV if those guys are on the same page. But beyond that, if you're CM Punk, and there are apologies, you don't have to be friends with anyone, but there are apologies, and the mission, whatever Cody Rhodes was talking about before, the mission is still the mission, which is, this is Tony's company, let's try to make this as good as we can. Will you work with an Adam Page? Would you work with a Young Bucks if they were willing to do it?
Well, I think Adam Page is irrelevant to this conversation.
Yeah, and more than likely he is, but I'm just saying in terms of what you're bringing back, would you?
That's what Page is irrelevant. The biggest money thing they could put together, the shortest term big money thing that would be attractive right away, it wouldn't need to be built, especially to the base AEW audience, is Punk and FTR against the Buckaroos and Harpo in a 6-man. Because, again, the Jerry Jarrett principle, people know there's legitimate heat. There's been a real fight. They don't like each other for a shoot. That is what draws money in wrestling. However, the problem becomes that in any other circumstance like that, when other guys have gotten in fights and done whatever down through the history of wrestling into territories and nationally or whatever, and people have known about it, they've turned it into a way to do something in the ring and sell tickets to it, and people have responded to it. But I don't know that you can do that here because, I mean, let's just face it, being legitimately real, my real opinion is Matt and Nick Jackson and Kenny Omega don't have any clue of what the wrestling business is and wouldn't have gotten in it if they'd known what it was to begin with, and they've been trying to change it into something that they want it to be because it's their specialty. They do that shit, so they want that to be wrestling, even though most people don't want that shit to be wrestling. And that unprofessionalism and stuck-upness and self-indulgence that they think their fucking farts don't smell. They don't even they think they even smell better than mine after a colonoscopy. I don't think that they realize that they're now in a position where they could be professional and do business with a guy and draw real money for the first time. They've brought their band of merry misfit fans with them, and they're like they do everywhere they go, but it's not real money. It's not sizable amount. It's not over 1 million people. We've seen that. To get a bunch more people interested in them that are not interested in their playtime matches into something that people might think there might be something go on here. The problem is they would probably not appreciate being in that position, and I don't think Punk could trust them to not take advantage of it. They run in his locker room, and he takes one down, beats one up, and his buddy takes care of the other two. That was a real fight, breaking out organically. But if I'm Punk and I'm working with these guys, I got to lay there for fucking Harpo to come off the top rope? Or I've got to stand there while the two little goof tennis shoe collectors throw super kicks at my face?
Or you work a different kind of match.
With a margin of error of 1/4 of an inch, and they can say afterwards, oh, shit, we're sorry. Fuck you. They need to build trust with Punk. He doesn't need to build trust with them. So if they want to be in the money picture, if they want to be in a big match that actually might help the company, they would have to do a lot of salabimming and a lot of fucking tuck and tail with Punk to get him to trust them. And then they would have to follow through with not fucking potatoing him. Or elsewise, and say what you want about his UFC career, but does anybody think that Phil Brooks or CM Punk can't take either one of the Bucks down and beat the fuck out of him? Come on. Seriously?
I think even they, especially after everything that happened in that locker room, and if you know what really happened, they didn't have a chance, and Omega didn't have a chance. I think even they would have to admit that.
I think Omega just wandered in confused like he is normally of what was going on around him and didn't realize until shit started happening.
He was in his usual stupor, you mean?
Yes, yeah. The stupor. But anyway, so I don't know whether they could put it together, because why would Punk trust them? Because they think that they're bulletproof. They think they're special. They think they're EVPs. They think they could potato somebody. And it's, oh, I'm sorry, except they would get the fuck beat out of them on live television, especially if FTR was in there, because then all three of them couldn't do anything. So, it would draw money, and if it was all a bunch of professional wrestlers, it would be happening probably already or close to. But since one half of that equation is a bunch of children who got into business that they didn't understand to do play acting and be video game characters, they're probably scared that they would legitimately get their ass beat again, and they're indignant that Tony would want them to apologize to this guy. So there's probably going to be no movement because they're children and he doesn't have to work with them.
Let me ask you this, because we've said that I genuinely felt bad for Tony Khan when everything happened. I don't agree with the way he's handled things since it happened. And I think a lot of blame, truthfully, needs to be put on Tony Khan for things getting to that point. Because he's the one person who could have put his foot down and stopped it. And he didn't.
He was hearing about it a long time before all of us heard about it. And he didn't do anything about it. So that's when it was made public.
Again, based on everything I know, I'm going to assume there's been very limited contact between Tony Khan, who was regularly talking to CM Punk as top star. It's been probably very little contact in the time since then. If you're CM Punk, based on everything that's happened, are you going to have any trust issues with Tony Khan if you did go back? Again, he knew. There's no way Tony Khan didn't know exactly how Punk felt about these guys. And you know what? I actually think there's no way Tony Khan more than likely didn't agree with CM Punk on this stuff. Because he knows, and he's been hearing it from other people, and he's seen other things that happened. But he just couldn't go and be the boss to his friends. That's what he couldn't do. So yes, can he trust Tony Khan?
here's the thing. I don't think anybody is going to accuse Tony of being a crook or a manipulative, like a Paul Heyman-like figure that's manipulating everyone behind the scenes for his own selfish purposes. He's not that person. He's not that smart. And that's why he's where he's at, because he came into wrestling thinking all these guys were going to be his friends because he's giving them jobs and everybody's going to be happy with each other because everybody enjoys each other in the wrestling business. And he finds out that it's egos and it's fucking backstabbing and it's goddamn jealousy and it's what about me instead of this other guy. And he can't stay friends with everybody. And he comes to the point where he has to tell some people, if not most people, what to do. Those are the things he can't handle. So I think everybody can trust Tony not to be a con man and a shyster and a crook and, manipulating people. But the reason why you can't trust Tony is because he's too nice and too trustworthy. He won't hurt anybody's feelings. He won't fucking talk badly to a friend, even if it's business. You can't trust him to do anything because he's scared to either make these guys mad or they won't like him anymore, or he's not a person that likes confrontation. I know this may come as a surprise, but you have to kind of like a little bit of confrontation to be in the wrestling business.
Or at least be able to manage it.
Yes. And that's why you can't really trust Tony, not because he's evil or has anybody's worst interest at heart or trying to take advantage of somebody. It's because he's in over his head and cannot manage all of this. And so you can't trust him to do the right thing because he may just chicken out and just say, well, have one of the lawyers talk to whoever. I don't want to talk to him because it won't be fun.
See, I think that's the real story. There's going to be no Punk coming back to AEW unless Punk and Tony Khan are on the same page, and we don't know what's the status of that relationship right now, but everyone in AEW, it's based around Tony Khan. And this is the biggest star AEW has ever had. It's all going to be about that relationship, and if that relationship is okay right now, and again, I don't know. I don't know what the status is. But you brought up another thing. We also don't know how much longer the Bucks and Omega will be there. So if you're Tony Khan and you're looking at your future, you got to look at who you think will be there in the future. The guy under contract or the guys who aren't under contract.
Well, and even if there wasn't a track record of one guy outdoing the other guys when it comes to drawing and business, yeah, because if he just signed Punk, what was it? I don't know if they ever determined the length of Punk's contract, but he hasn't been back more than a little over a year now, right? So he's still got some time to go, and he certainly has not worn out his welcome to the point where the other three have. But that's, unfortunately, that's what we're going to find out. If Tony Khan has the nerve and the balls to do what's right, tell those other three, hey, you fucked me royally, and you've started this whole goddamn thing, and it's your fucking fault that it all came out in public, so you go to that guy and make him feel welcome, regardless of whatever you have to do. Kenny, fucking treat him like a Bushi. Make him welcome. Punk would probably turn down the Ibushi treatment from Kenny, but nevertheless. And if they wouldn't do it, they'd say, okay, well, then in that case, then I'm just going to send you guys home and pay you out for the rest of the year. Here's the thing. Where are they going to fucking go? Kenny will go back to Japan. The Jacksons will go back to fucking Cucamonga. Because if the WWE knows and is fully aware that Tony don't want him anymore, they wouldn't try to hire him. They only tried to hire him before to keep the billionaire's son from having access to them when he was starting a wrestling promotion, the content and quality of which they had no idea of at that point. Now that they've seen it and they've seen what's going on, and these guys have stellar records at running TV viewers away and people rolling their eyes at their indulgent trampoline routines, you think the WWE is going to offer them anywhere near the amount of money they're making now if they were to know that AEW wasn't even going to try? What the fuck? Why would they do that? Here's something that the other guys that can compete with our budget don't want and nobody else can afford to come anywhere close to, so we're going to give them a big contract? Fuck.
And it's a tryout thing in a sense. I don't mean like it's a tryout like a guy at a taping, but we've also never, ever seen if the Young Bucks can work under the confines of someone else's rules.
No, they can't. They can't. And they will refuse to. That's their whole thing, killing the business. That's the name of their company that they started. That's the name of their book. They can't do it the way anybody else tells them to do it or the way everybody else does it. They have to do their own shit. That's the only way they get over. And the only time that they were allowed to do their own shit, it leads to the fucking downfall of the rest of the company because it makes it impossible for anybody to take the rest of the programming from that company seriously when you got these two little jokers running around. So that's the point I'm trying to make is the only reason they got offers before is because the WWE didn't want the billionaire's son to have access to anything. If they were to be on the outs with Tony, they would be worthless in the wrestling business except to go to Japan. Kenny'd be back on top over there, and the Bucks would be back jerking the curtain with the junior heavyweight tag belts. And that's where else they're going to go.
Well, Jim, perhaps things would have played out a little differently if Tony Khan only had good legal advice, as opposed to the usual people that have been there for a while and are very comfortable and know how to play with Tony. Good, sound legal advice. I think that's what Tony Khan needs.
That's right, because the legal advice Tony's getting right now from his legal people that are in various positions under him or under other people, whatever positions they're in, Stephen P. New don't get in any of those positions. He puts other people in those positions, right?
Call Stephen P. New. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
And folks, I know that many of you, if you have been wronged, wrongfully terminated, if you've been poisoned, if you've been kicked out of your home, if you've been deprived of common, ordinary household comforts by a negligent energy company or any of these things, you want those people that got sideways with you to be in some kind of certain position. Whether it be ready to be received doggy style, reverse cowgirl, missionary, whatever the position, Stephen P. New, he's always the giver, and the perpetrator is always the receiver. Just bear that in mind, because if somebody has penetrated you in a way that you are not happy with, well, just turn it over to Stephen P. New, and I'll tell you what, he may have somebody else holding the head, but he's going to be fucking that dog. And speaking of dogs, you heard
Stephen
about
P. New does not fuck dogs, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, in a metaphorical sense.
He fucks the shit out of them metaphorically.
Metaphorically, oh my, he's to death, metaphorically. And you can call somebody, it's insulting to dogs, but you can call somebody that has taken advantage of you and your family a dog, someone that has cost you and your family money that you use to put food in their mouths and on their table, or in their table and on their mouths. Whichever it may be, you'd call them a dog. Well, Stephen P. New is going to round up all the stray dogs out there and bring them to legal justice. Just like, remember, we talked about that Entergy guy, the energy company down there in Louisiana, left hundreds of thousands of people without power because they did not spend the money to increase their infrastructure so it could handle hurricanes. Instead, they gave it all to the big wigs. And the guy who used to run the whole Entergy company has now been run off in shame, but he's running off with $43 million worth of stock in that company. That's what they repay people for when they deprive innocent human beings of their electrical power and to power their CPAP machines and their resuscitators and their iron lungs. You know how much power it takes to run an iron lung these days.
I've heard.
So, Stephen P. New is bringing Entergy to justice. He's also going to be filing I'm talking multiple suits in the very near future on behalf of more of the opioid-addicted babies in West Virginia and other places. There's about a half a dozen different states he's going to be filing suits in. He's got his finger in a bunch of different class action suits all over the country to Stephen P. New, and he can do the same thing for you. If you need bailed out or represented or helped out of a bad situation, you need legal representation, Stephen P. New is the man for you. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. And if you're a famous wrestling personality and you need your name trademarked, well, he can point you in the right direction there also. Stephen P. New is the man for you.
He loves helping out wrestlers, considering how much he loves wrestling. So that's the truth. If you're a wrestler and you need some help, get in touch with Stephen P. New.
Yeah, don't let these dishonest major corporations like wrestling promotions owned by billionaires and sons of billionaires take advantage of you. Get representation.
That's right. But Jim, let's get a couple more questions and get the hell out of here today. Speaking of billionaires, this next question was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from William in Baltimore, who is not a billionaire, I don't believe. I have been pondering the proposed sale of the WWE. I have also been pondering why Vince would want to sell instead of passing ownership down to Stephanie. Would you agree that Vince doesn't need the money? Is the sale a sign of the lack of confidence in Stephanie? Something about this doesn't pass the smell test.
No, we've talked about this. It's not like that, it's been a family business that long. It's not like under normal circumstances that Vince wouldn't, I want to pass it down to the kids, or whatever. But no, he sees now that not only is the company valued at $6 billion, which when did they do the IPO and sold the stock? 2001?
I thought it was actually 99 or 2000, but maybe
was it 2000? Okay, whatever the case it was. In 1995, he was fucking, again, miserable because they lost $6 million that year. He'd never lost money before in the wrestling business. And he was fucking verklempt about it. That's fucking less than a payoff to an illegal paralegal now. The amounts of money that we're talking about now, I think that Vince, two things. One, he wants to be around when that company sells, which it's never done before except from his father to him, for billions of dollars. And secondly, as we talked about when we analyzed this thing a couple weeks ago, I think he's seen the signs that the rights fees are collapsing, that the new TV contracts might not be as certain as they were, that some of the players are out of the game now, and they could be massively devalued. And if Vince McMahon was worried about losing $6 million in 1995, you think he wants to lose $2.5 billion off of his fucking valuation of his company overnight?
Yeah, that's another thing. Everyone always says, and the email here said, doesn't Vince have enough money? They always say he's a billionaire. It's not like that's in cash. It's in stock.
No, they just said that and I mean, not like this isn't a large amount of money, but the WWE currently has about $400 and something million in cash and $200 and something million in debt. And so it's not like Vince has $6 billion, like you said, in a fucking checking account. He's got more money or has access to more money and has more valuable things that he owns than he'll ever need. Yes, but it's Vince. The scorecard is who ends up with everything, that person wins. Who is the richest person in the world? That person's the most important person in the world. Who's the most successful? He's so competitive. It's me right now. I have things for the rest of my life that I would like, and I sure do want to plant a bunch more trees. We got a few more renovations. I need, the water softeners need replaced, but I could probably exist for the rest of my life right now and be happy to not have to go through a lot of fucking trouble and work and stress and aggravation with what I've got. But Vince has never thought that way. Vince is like, I've got to have more, got to get more, got to do more. got to be bigger. So I think it's those two things. It's not just, well, I'm getting old and nothing's really changed about the company and nothing's going to change. It's running the same way. So I'll give it to Stephanie. It's like, no, we built this thing up where it's worth $6 billion, allegedly. But that balloon might pop, and the time is now, and I'm back to get this thing done. That's what I think. And Vince can never have enough money. It's not because he even wants the money. It's just like that's the way he keeps score. Whether it's, him and Trump being pissy because Trump's plane was bigger than Vince's or whatever. It's not even that he's not going to spend it having a good time. He's not going to get like the greatest hookers in the world. He's not going to have fun with it. He's going to fucking use it to make more money with. But to me, that's it.
Well, Jim, some breaking news before we wrap up. I'm getting sent this by a few people from SI.com, an article about Mark Briscoe and just wrestling news in general. And it mentions this here. Let me read this for you. Khan revealed that Ring of Honor, which he purchased last March, will start airing new weekly television shows on Thursday, March 2nd on Honor Club, the streaming service platform. The first tapings will be February 25th and February 26th at Universal Studios in Orlando. So there it is, Ring of Honor, not on TV itself, but a new streaming show, taping in Orlando. What are your thoughts?
Who's going to book it?
I think you know the answer to that.
Okay, so now he's doing 2 hours on Wednesday. He's doing an hour on Friday. Now he's going to do whatever the fuck this is for Honor Club on their own website. Plus, I would assume that he's responsible for Dark and After Dark and Before Dark and Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me or whatever the fuck other programs they have. He can pop the corn too, I would guess, but at some point, when is he going to have a stroke and die and bleed out in the middle of the goddamn street?
Let's not say that.
I'm not saying but what are you fucking doing to yourself, Tony? Again, it's something that he's getting into, and as he's starting to buy more companies and get more shows and do more, he is not putting together any kind of infrastructure to address the problems that have been there since day one. He's just going to do all this shit himself. Any human being fucking can't. All of this, it's ridiculous. That's the problems. That's why guys you see everybody complaining, well, I went home and he forgot about me. I couldn't get him on the phone. Lance Archer, remember him? He just said, yeah, I haven't laced up my boots in 2 months, and it's not my decision. They can't find him, they can't get him, or elsewise, if there's trouble, they can't get him. And he hired 6 people in talent relations so that he didn't have to talk to any of the boys because he's off booking more fucking imaginary wrestling shows for companies that he's yet to start. It's too much, especially for... Look at Tony, you can tell he's withering under this, and he's an excitable boy to begin with, to quote Warren Zevon. And have you seen the clips that are out there of him hugging people awkwardly and or jumping up and down in some kind of spasm playing wrestling promoter?
Well, he's socially awkward, but that's a different thing. He's socially
okay, but
that's a different thing.
All I'm saying is, before he runs 2 different wrestling programs across 3 or 4 different platforms, might be an idea if he gets his shit together on just one of those first. That's my comment. I'll leave it alone there.
Well, considering what Ring of Honor always was, and again, it's very different since Tony bought it, but if the idea is to treat it still as this separate entity, at least in terms of feeling and ambiance, what do you think about the idea they're going to be taping it at Universal Studios?
Well, you don't need to know where something is being shot.
Based on the crowds you'll get, actually, is more specific to why I'm saying that, because Ring of Honor, so much of Ring of Honor was always about the audience.
Yeah, well...
For good or for bad.
Again, I remember when I was in TNA and we were shooting at Universal, and you do 3 days in a row, and the third day there'd be almost nobody in there. You know, the first day pay-per-view, yes, all the fans from Florida and around the area, they would come, and you got in free. And then the second day for the TV, it'd be okay, you know. And then the third day, because how many days in a row can people come even if it's free, right? And they kept saying, well, we need a better crowd. We need a better crowd. If we could only get out of Orlando. Well, they got out of Orlando and spent a bunch more money and didn't have better crowds. They didn't have that many people. My thought was taping in Orlando, Florida, as a city, as a location, should have been easy as pie because it's a big city and you got a lot of fucking people there. And you're letting them in free. Right? The problem was when you go 3 days in a row, or the fact that then they had FCW, and then they had the outlaw shows in Florida, and then everybody got used to going to wrestling in Orlando and not paying anything. And then there was too much free wrestling from everybody to go to, so it started to kill it. But as far as we did the same thing in Louisville. We let people in free for our TV tapings, and we were full every week for about 3.5 or 4 years straight, till Laurinaitis started fucking with me, and then Heyman started booking. And then it emptied out real quick. But by the same token, we gave them a show that they wanted to see and that they wanted to come back and see again. What the people in Orlando with TNA got was a bunch of disjointed matches. A lot of times they didn't show shit on the screen. They couldn't show shit on the screen because we were taping ahead. Or it was just bullshit because of shit stain people didn't understand. So they didn't give those people a good show that kept them coming back. They got in free and they saw a parade of matches, some of which were bleh. If you can give the people once a week or 2 days in a row, once a month, or some agreeable schedule like that where you're not just wearing people out, just making the trip over there, and you give them a show that they want to fucking see, that they enjoy, and they want to come back and see more of, then Orlando will be fine. But if it's just taping endless loops of meaningless matches to put shit together in post later on, and the people there live don't know half the fuck of what's even going on, they're going to get the same thing as everybody else has got. Fans in Orlando are bored with fucking free wrestling. They've seen so much of it, and they don't particularly give a shit. That's why when they wanted to do the developmental training program in Florida, I thought they were out of their mind, because if I had the entire country to choose from to start a localized wrestling promotion to use as a training facility, the two places that I would stay away from in the entire country are California and Florida. California, because it's too big, it's too expensive, and it's just too much.
And the homeless have taken over.
And the homeless, and also because then all the wrestlers would want to be TV fucking celebrities. And Florida, because they've seen so much wrestling, so much outlaw wrestling, so much bad wrestling, and you don't have to pay for a goddamn wrestling ticket there anymore, and haven't for 15 years.
And the homeless took over a long time ago.
So that's all of that.
Jim, more breaking news before we wrap things up today.
Oh, boy.
At the age of 82, Raquel Welch has passed away.
Holy shit. I hadn't thought of Raquel Welch as in the manner of what age she would be currently, but I can't believe Raquel Welch is older than Jerry Jarrett.
That is
just
crazy.
Doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I know. Favorite Raquel Welch role?
Well, the one we had, I guess, in Des Plaines, Illinois in 1986 was the best role that I ever had with Raquel.
Oh, will you stop it?
Oh, no. No, she was in 1 Million BC. I don't remember the character's name. Who gives a fuck about what her parts were? I'd rather look at her parts than her acting parts.
Gorgeous woman.
She was just plain purty. Just plain purty. Purty as a brand new speckled pup.
Before plastic surgery was a necessity, she was naturally beautiful. But Raquel Welch, dead at the age of 82. And with that, Jim, we're going to
wrap... And this show, dead at the 4-hour mark.
You a fan of the Misfits?
I thought that was an original piece.
No, that was Last Caress by the Misfits, a classic.
Oh, I forgot to caress them at all.
Do you have a favorite Misfit?
I actually, the Misfits, wasn't that, who were the Misfits? Dennis used to book them.
No, not those Misfits. You're thinking of Harley Lewis and Derek Domino.
Yeah, the Misfits.
No, I'm talking about Glenn Danzig, Jerry Only, Doyle, Bobby Steele. The Misfits.
I didn't know about them. I've met Danzig a couple times, but I didn't know he did something beforehand.
You know that this is what made him almost semi-famous enough to become Danzig. But no, Bobby Steele's my favorite because he was the most fucked up, apparently, of the whole bunch. And for that brief moment in time, and I think it's probably 1980, it could be 1979, that brief moment where Bob Gruen, the photographer, was able to get John Lennon to come out of the Dakota and come check out some of the bands downtown. He had a good time, apparently, and he's leaving CBGB, and there's Bobby Steele sitting outside, looks a little disheveled, and John Lennon, feeling good about things, says, "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" And Bobby Steele looks at him and says, "Hey, you're John." And just throws up all over him. That's the famous Bobby Steele story from John Lennon's excursion into CBGB. But with that, the drive-thru is closed. And a wonderful song from Chris Rogers, CR in the CBNL. Once again, another great song from him. Of course, the Jim Cornette Experience returns this weekend, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And of course, the drive-thru right back here next week. Go through the archive today, patreon.com/Cornette. $5 a month gets you access to the archive going back to 2013, patreon.com/Cornette. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, all with the very popular Travis Heckel artwork, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And don't forget about the wrestling news at thewrestlingnews.com, or look for Arcadian Vanguard's The Wrestling News wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com. What's going on, Jim?
Cameos. Saturday, March 4th, noon Eastern, limited again to 80 of them. Jump in. Last time they sold out in an hour. This is your makeup. This is for the people who got left out before. Get them while you can. Cameo video, personalized messages, Saturday, March 4th at noon Eastern, jimcornette.com. Just click on the Cameo button. And more plugs next week.
At jimcornette.com. Of course, the drive-thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until this weekend on The Experience, and next week right back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!